Chapter 981. As expected of a great sect with a legacy. It's not a joke to be able to stand for 10,000 years. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but admire them from the bottom of his heart. Of the 5 sects with immortal heritage, Zhang Xiaohua had seen 3 of them. Among them, the Misty School was the one with whom he had the deepest feelings and the closest affinity. However, it was also the worst of the 3. Basically, it only had martial arts and no traces of immortal heritage. Only a few forbidden areas in ethereal heights could prove that the Misty School was related to immortal heritage. Even sect leader O Pong was only at the level of martial arts, and not even at the peak. He didn't even have a trace of divine sense. On the other hand, the fragrance cult was full of immortal heritage. Zhang Xiaohua's series of immortal opportunities were all achieved in the fragrance cult. The fragrance cult's leader, Abbess Jing Yi, was even a cultivator of immortal heritage. What about the Dalan Temple? Although he hadn't seen Master Longevity yet, just by looking at the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth in the Dalan Temple and a few ordinary guardian disciples, he could already disturb the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth with the formation of martial arts. What was there to say about the immortal heritage in the temple? The fragrance cult respected female disciples, and their heritage was also strict. The Dalan Temple, on the other hand, only accepted male disciples. Although men and women were equal in this world, men's cultivation potential was many times stronger than women's. The number of men who could cultivate was 100 or 1,000 times more than that of women. Therefore, the Dalan Temple's strength should be above the fragrance cult. Of course, as for the mysterious Tenryu sect, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't guess. After all, he had only seen Qin Shiyue and the Flood Dragon King of the Seas. Oh, right, I wonder how Xiaoye and that Ajiao are doing now? Don't tell me they're buried in the sea. For a moment, Zhang Xiaohua's mind wandered. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua's gaze was somewhat sluggish, the monks in the Arhat formation were overjoyed, thinking that they had a chance. Zhang Xiaohua was confused by the sound of the staff. One of the monks immediately raised the long staff and chopped down on her head. That long pole was full of vigor. Not only did it cause the wind to howl, even the little Yuan Qi of heaven and earth in the array surged along with the tip of the pole. Zhang Xiaohua snapped out of his daze and saw a series of afterimages flashing by the pole before his eyes. He exerted a little force in his legs, intending to use the ethereal steps to dodge. However, just as he exerted force in his legs, his heart skipped a beat. The great master Chang'eng has been to the Misty School and watched the martial arts exhibition. He should know about my ethereal steps. If I use it here, doesn't that mean that I am the kid he saw before? Even if he can't confirm it, he must know about my relationship with the Misty School. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua's feet paused. At this moment, that wooden pole was already in front of his eyes. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate and raised Hanya to block in front of his eyes. In his mind, although this long pole brought about a lot of wind, the strength of the pole was limited. Although he blocked it in a hurry, it should be more than enough. Who knew that when the long pole struck Zhang Xiaohua's Hanya, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt a jolt. That long pole actually transmitted an incomparably huge force, as though it was going to knock Hanya out of her hands. Io! Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Without thinking, he clenched his fist tightly and released it forcefully. Kong! Hanya was knocked back. Zhang Xiaohua felt as though he was hit by a huge rock and retreated a few steps. But before he could steady himself, woo-woo, the sound of the wind rose again. The monk behind Zhang Xiaohua also raised his pole and mercilessly struck at the back of his head. Luckily, after the long pole hit, it immediately retracted and didn't pursue. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua have some free time. He turned his body slightly and used Hanya to block the long pole behind him. This time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He used a total of 70% of his strength to block that long pole. It was still the same huge force as before. Zhang Xiaohua's arm was slightly sore, and he borrowed the force to retreat a few steps. He wanted to dissipate the force. Who would have thought that after the second strike, there would be another long stick coming from his left arm? My God! After Zhang Xiaohua received the third strike, he couldn't help but be shocked. Are you kidding me? How can this Dalan Temple monk be so brave and powerful? Everyone's arms have the strength of over 10,000 gene. With this kind of strength, how can they not dominate the pugilistic world? Unknowingly, Zhang Xiaohua's yearning towards the Dalan Temple was like a torrential river, but he was in the array and couldn't use his light body techniques. He could only use Hanya to meet force with force. Another cup of tea's time had passed, and Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how many strikes he had received. Luckily, his strength had always been his strength, and the Big Dipper magical fist was a daily practice, so he was able to cope with it. But after such a long time, Zhang Xiaohua once again felt that something was strange. Firstly, although there were 18 monks in this Arhat array, every time Zhang Xiaohua was attacked, there was only one person. The rest didn't join in. It wasn't like what he had thought, where everyone would rush up and attack together. Secondly, the strength of each strike was the same, which meant that the strength of the 18 monks was about the same. This wasn't much, but as time passed, the strength of the strike gradually decreased. What made Zhang Xiaohua very suspicious was that the strength of the 18 monks was also decreasing. Could it be? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ponder. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua expanded his divine sense slightly. Not long after, he found something strange. He saw that when a monk raised his staff, two faint and mysterious waves were transmitted from his two sides. And when he struck out with his long staff, an even weaker wave was transmitted from his body to the monks on his two sides. Looking carefully, in the entire Arhat array, between the 18 monks, there was this strange wave that was constantly transmitted. Understood. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes narrowed slightly. This is the legendary force transmission. In internal strength, one can transmit one's internal strength to others through the hand or other body parts, allowing one's internal strength to be used by others for a period of time. Or, one can attack others through other people's meridians, such as hitting a cow through a mountain. And this Dalan Temple's martial arts seniors are even more powerful. They created this Arhat array, which can actually connect everyone's strength together, using the strength of 18 people to attack one person. I can resist these 18 people, but what if there are 28 people, or 108 people? How can I resist them? Moreover, if there are 10,000 people in the Arhat array, won't the Dalan Temple be invincible in Jianghu? Perhaps only the immortal Tao can deal with it. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He seemed to have thought of what Master Chongqing said just now. Seeing that you're still young, I won't use the real array. Of course, after receiving the attacks of the 18 monks, the strength of the array was gradually weakening. Zhang Xiaohua gradually understood. Since he entered the array, the Dalan Temple's monks first used the sound of the rods to disturb his mind, then used the long rods to attack, creating a situation where the one who makes the first move gains the advantage. Stick after stick, the 18 monks' strength flowed between the rods. If Zhang Xiaohua broke their coordination, or if he persisted until the 18 monks' strength was exhausted, the Arhat array would collapse on its own. He understood this logic, but if he really wanted to do it, it would be difficult in the eyes of others. Because the 18 rods in the Arhat array had a tacit understanding, stick after stick, it was seamless, and there was no room for him to take a breath to counterattack. But if he had to fight against 18 people and exhaust his strength, it was impossible for an ordinary person to even think about it. He reckoned that Nun Jingyi had also relied on her exquisite swordsmanship and the Qinggong of Chuanxiang cult to gain the upper hand in the fight against the cudgel. From there, she broke the tacit understanding of the Arhat formation and obtained the final victory. However, these two methods of breaking the formation were as easy as drinking water for Zhang Xiaohua. Once he understood the true essence of the Arhat formation, he naturally had a plan in his heart. Exhausting the strength of the 18 monks was indeed a waste of time. Furthermore, he still had 2 more stages to pass in the future. There were still uses for him to conserve his strength. As for Qinggong and swordsmanship, Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to embarrass himself with them, so the only thing left was to use strength to defeat the enemy. Zhang Xiaohua let out a long laugh and said, "Many thanks for the guidance of the senior brothers of the Dalan Temple. This one is going to make his move." While he was speaking, a long stick came attacking from under his armpit. Zhang Xiaohua held Bo Ri horizontally and used his strength to chop down diagonally. Dang! It hit the long stick. In his spiritual sense, he saw that the monk on the other side was about to make his move. Bo-ri didn't stop and directly waved. Woo! Before the monk made his move, Bo-ri had already struck his long stick. Seeing that Bo-ri had anticipated the enemy and suddenly appeared in front of him, the monk was greatly alarmed. His long stick trembled slightly, and before the other 17 monks' strength could reach him, he made his move. Who would have thought that Zhang Xiaohua would only lightly strike Bo-ri on his long stick, and then move his body to the side? Bo-ri rushed towards another disciple who was about to make his move. That disciple was even more anxious. According to the Arhat formation, the next one to make his move would be him. Moreover, this sequence wasn't the same every time. No matter what, he couldn't believe that Zhang Xiaohua would actually attack him before he was completely unprepared. He had no choice but to fight back. As long as he waved his long stick, he would strike. However, he wasn't in a hurry to make this move, and the flow of his strength was interrupted. This strike only had his own strength, so how could it compare to Zhang Xiaohua's Bo-ri? Just as he was about to be hit by Zhang Xiaohua's Bo-ri, he heard praise from outside the formation. Good move. Young benefactor, not only do your internal strength is profound, your mind is even more meticulous. You actually guessed which disciple made the move, and you can still maintain such a calm mind in this dangerous situation. Even Abbess Jingyi from that year couldn't compare. Hearing Reverend Chang Xing's words, Zhang Xiaohua held Bo-ri in his hand and laughed. Not at all. Reverend Leader's wisdom is as vast as the sea. This disciple can't compare to you. Being able to find a way to break the Arhat formation is also a great fortune. -4. Chapter 982. After hearing Master Chang Xing's words and seeing Zhang Xiaohua stop, the Arhat formation also stopped. Knowing that the formation had been broken, all the monks' faces were filled with shame. You can leave now, Great Master Changgung said expressionlessly. Remember, there is always someone better than you. Although Ren Xiaoxia is young, his martial arts are strong and his inner strength is rare. You all underestimated him from the beginning. Thank you for your teachings, martial uncle. The 18 monks put their palms together and bowed before retreating. Meng, who was beside Great Master Changgung, anxiously ran over and asked softly, "How are you? Are you injured?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly at her and smiled. "Thank you for your concern, senior sister." Meng pursed her lips and smiled, not saying anything else. A monk in black walked quickly to Master Chang Xing with a heavy expression and whispered a few words into his ear. Master Chang Xing raised his white eyebrows and was somewhat surprised. He inadvertently looked at Zhang Xiaohua and gave a few more instructions. The monk then walked away. Zhang Xiaohua felt a bit strange. Something must have happened in the Dalan temple. However, he didn't cause any trouble, so Master Chang Xing shouldn't have any reason to suspect him. It was rare for Zhang Xiaohua to be so magnanimous. "All right, young benefactor, I didn't expect you to break the Arhat formation so easily. It really exceeded my expectations." Master Chang Xing said with a smile. "Master, you flatter me. I still have to thank you for your mercy. If there were a few more people, I definitely wouldn't have been able to break the formation." Zhang Xiaohua said modestly. Master Chang Xing smiled and said, "This Arhat formation has a base of 9. There are at least 9 people, then 18, 27, until 81 people. Old Na wanted to gather 27 people, but it's a pity that the requirements for the monks to set up the Arhat formation are too high. The 18 people that young benefactor saw just now grew up together, ate and drank together, and practiced together. Among them, many people were eliminated before these 18 people were selected, and they were able to communicate with each other in mind. Alas, even if that is the case just now, if that disciple had ignored young benefactor's long sword, when the focus of the formation had shifted to him, young benefactor might not have been able to break it so easily. It's just that between life and death, who can blame him? Zhang Xiaohua came to a realization and nodded. What Master said makes sense. All right, let's not talk anymore. Would you like to take a rest? Master Chang Xing asked. That day, your honorable sex Shirtai Jing, he also rested for half a day before continuing the next match. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and said, "That's fine. Since Cult Master has learned from his mistakes, how can this disciple not follow? Very good. This old monk has some mundane affairs to deal with. Young benefactor, please rest for the time being. This old monk will return in a moment, and then I will pass through the next stage. Soon after, the two masters got up and went to the place where the cold wind came from. Zhang Xiaohua and Ming sat under a tree, accompanied by a monk who was in charge of receiving guests. So something happened to the Dalan temple. I was wondering why they kept telling me to rest. They even used Shirtai Jingyi's story. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the monk who was brewing tea and asked, Master, may I ask where senior brother Kongchan went? The monk was a little embarrassed. Martial Uncle Kongchan has something important to do. Perhaps young benefactor will see him in a while. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless, but Ming scolded. Why did you create so many problems? What are you thinking of doing? Cult Master also didn't say that we would embarrass the Dalan temple for no reason. It's precisely because of the previous embarrassment that Cult Master didn't specifically warn us. Think about it, Cult Master promoted me to a guardian disciple for no reason. Wasn't it because he valued the strength of my arms? He didn't even ask about my background? Now that I think about it, he had already made up his mind. Even if I didn't break through the array today, he would still want me to help him gain face in the future. Ming also suddenly understood. That day on Lingering Fragrance Peak, she only reunited with Zhang Xiaohua and obtained the cult master's permission. She didn't think much about these details. Now that Zhang Xiaohua mentioned it, wasn't it exactly the same? But you don't have to take out our fragrant religion's internal cultivation method as a wager. If cult master finds out, wouldn't. Seeing that Ming was worried about her, Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed up. She said, although it's a bit dangerous, I don't know what's so scary about the next 2 trials, but Cult Master has passed these 3 trials, and he thinks that I can do it. Perhaps I really can. This internal cultivation method is just a wager. If I don't lose, can Cult Master still scold me? What's more, do you think the mental cultivation method that the hierarch gave me is the best mental cultivation method in our fragrant cult? Meng was speechless. The Dalan temple benefited. It's not a big deal. Grandmaster Changsheng can tell Cult Master that our Dalan temple has seen your internal cultivation method. What about your protector disciple? If you don't say anything, who will know? Ming rolled her eyes at him and said, Your little abacus is really good. That's right. This one is called the Golden Abacus in Jianghu, Ren Xiaoyao. After a while, Grandmaster Changsheng and Great Master Changgung returned. Their eyes were slightly gloomy, but their faces were smiling. They said, Young benefactor, have you rested well? Zhang Xiaohua stood up and said, Many thanks, Grandmaster. I have rested well. Please advise me. Good. Great Master Changgung smiled and waved his hand. The door of the Dalan temple opened. A middle-aged monk wearing a moon-white frock slowly walked out with a weapon similar to the sword embryo in Zhang Xiaohua's hand in his arms. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes first fell on the monk's face. She was slightly startled. Wasn't this the Kongchan monk she saw on the mountain just now? When her eyes fell on the weapon in Kongchan's arms, she was even more surprised. The weapon looked like a long sword, but it was not a long sword. If it was a sword embryo, it was 100 times more complicated than a sword embryo. The top of the weapon was like a sword tip, but it was divided into 4 sides. Next, there was an undulating bump. This bump was engraved with strange patterns. The patterns were divided into several small sections, and between each section, there was a slight bulge. Then, there was a handle, which should be the place to hold the weapon. Finally, there was a statue's head. The statue's face was very ferocious, baring its teeth. It was abnormally fierce. Knowing that Kongchan was the host of the second test, Zhang Xiaohua walked forward with the sword in her hand. After the two greeted each other, Kongchan said, Benefactor Ren, I didn't expect your martial arts to be so profound. You actually broke the Great Arhat formation so easily. I have no choice but to see your martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. It turns out that Grandmaster Kongchan is also a protector's disciple. I was rude just now. By the way, what is the weapon in Grandmaster's arms? Why does it look so different from ordinary long swords and other items? Kongchan held the weapon's handle with one hand. His face flashed with a green light. He waved the weapon and said proudly, "This is a treasure passed down by the Dalan Temple from 10,000 years ago. It is called the demon-subduing pestle. It is the weapon in the hands of my protector's disciple." Demon-subduing pestle? Zhang Xiaohua was enlightened. He secretly placed a wisp of his spiritual will on the demon-subduing pestle. Indeed, there was a large amount of heaven-earth yuan qi on the pestle. From top to bottom, from inside to inside, it was unknown how many talismans had been added to it. Between the bumps and the fine lines, there was a fluctuation of talismans. I wonder if this demon-subduing pestle, is there anything special about it? I hope Senior Kongchan can enlighten me. Hee. This demon-subduing pestle is used by the outer sect protectors. It is a treasure used to subdue demons and devils. This poor monk doesn't fully understand the wonders of it. It is a shame to say that in this poor monk's hands, this demon-subduing pestle can only be used as an ordinary weapon. The only special thing is that this demon-subduing pestle is as light as a piece of grass in this poor monk's hands. But when used against those of the unorthodox path, it is as heavy as a mountain. Tsk, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when she heard this. Oh my, this kind of thing is still not satisfied? You are holding a piece of grass, and when used against me, it is as heavy as a mountain. This immortal weapon is really indescribable. Moreover, this is clearly using an immortal weapon to bully a martial weapon. Who can beat you? Zhang Xiaohua muttered to herself. But now that they had reached the second stage, Zhang Xiaohua could only brace herself and step forward. Senior Kongchan, I am not from the unorthodox path. If this demon-subduing pestle hits me, it won't be as heavy as a mountain, right? Kongchan glanced at Zhang Xiaohua and said with a faint smile, Benefactorin, you can try it and you will know. Fine. Zhang Xiaohua waved Hanya and stepped forward. Since this is a famous treasure of the Dalan Temple, wouldn't it be a pity if I don't take a look at it? Sure, Benefactorin. This poor monk will make his move now. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Zhang Xiaohua said go ahead, and Kongchan made his move. His face turned green, and he lifted the demon-subduing pestle easily. Buzz. The demon-subduing pestle emitted a terrifying sound. The elemental energy around Zhang Xiaohua surged and pressed against Zhang Xiaohua. Before the demon-subduing pestle could even get close, Zhang Xiaohua found it difficult to breathe. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on his forehead. All right. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, he was determined to win. He shook the great wisdom in his hand and pointed it at the tip of the demon-subduing pestle, unwilling to admit defeat. Kongchan did not dodge, and the demon-subduing pestle did not change its move. Pa! It was extremely soft, even softer than when Pan Rua hit the long rod. But then, there was a series of creaking sounds, which made people's ears straighten. It was the sound of Pan Rua's sword tip sliding on the demon-subduing pestle. Zhang Xiaohua thrust out Bo Ri and stabbed it into the exorcism pestle. However, the exorcism pestle was just as Kongchan had said, heavier than a mountain. Zhang Xiaohua's arm was a little numb, and the tip of her sword couldn't resist it. She took a few steps back, and the exorcism pestle flashed with a green light, increasing its weight. The tip of her sword that was pressed against the exorcism pestle slid forward, making an ear-piercing sound. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Doesn't this demon-subduing pestle weigh more than 20,000 kilograms? -4. Chapter 983. Monk Kongchan was right. 20,000 jin was as heavy as a small mountain for a martial arts expert, not to mention an ordinary person. When this exorcism pestle hit a person's body, it was as heavy as a mountain. However, strength was Zhang Xiaohua's forte. With the fist of the North Star honing his bones every day, the strength in his arms was constantly increasing. Although 20,000 jin of strength sounded shocking, it was not unattainable for Zhang Xiaohua. Moreover, when Zhang Xiaohua received Kongchan's exorcism pestle, he already had a plan in mind. Although Monk Kongchan was a guardian disciple and his arms were not weak, far from Kongjian's, Zhang Xiaohua believed that his single-arm strength definitely did not exceed 20,000 jin. As for why he could wave the exorcism pestle around like it was a piece of grass, it could only mean one thing. He used his mana. He used his mana to drive the talismans on the exorcism pestle, causing it to produce a huge amount of weight. This method of exchanging mana for weight was unique to the Immortal Tao. If it was during the Immortal Tao's heyday, needless to say, there would be limitless vitality in the world for people to squander and use as mana to support the exorcism pestle's weight. If Zhang Xiaohua purely relied on his own strength and did not use the Immortal Tao's methods, he would not be a match. But what was the situation now? The martial Tao was flourishing, and the vitality of the world had just recovered. Zhang Xiaohua did not know what method Kongchan used to use his mana to support the exorcism pestle, but he knew that it was definitely an expedient tactic. It was a trick that the martial Tao's seniors learned from the Immortal Tao's methods. The direct result of this method was that it could not last long and could only be effective for a short period of time. As long as he could endure the most difficult initial stage, even if he did not counterattack, Kongchan would be defeated. Perhaps last time, Nanjingyi had seen through the peculiarity and won the competition. However, it was difficult to put it into practice. Monk Kongchan waved the exorcism pestle like a long sword, sometimes pointing, sometimes stabbing, and sometimes chopping. Every time he waved, there was a strong pressure, forcing Zhang Xiaohua to dodge. Kongchan's qinggong was good, so Zhang Xiaohua could barely fight back. He raised Bo Ri and barely managed to clash with the exorcism pestle a few times. His right arm was very sore and almost unable to use the sword. Zhang Xiaohua had to find some time. He passed the sword to his left hand, calmed himself down, and performed the nameless swordsmanship again, entangling with the exorcism pestle. Zhang Xiaohua did not know if it was because of the mysterious flow in his left arm, but his left arm seemed to be stronger than his right arm. Under the strange sword moves of the nameless swordsmanship, Zhang Xiaohua withstood a few more moves. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was struggling at death's door, Kongchan showed a smile on his face. He jumped up, and the green light on his face became brighter. He hit Zhang Xiaohua one move after another. Just when Zhang Xiaohua could not hold back and wanted to fight back, the time was not right. Before the power of the exorcism pestle in Kongchan's hand was reduced, Zhang Xiaohua found that the way Kongchan used the exorcism pestle was quite similar to the way Kongjian used the exorcism pestle. Therefore, he paid attention and received a few more moves. His heart was set. He held Pan Ruo in his right hand, laughed and said, "Senior brother Kongchan, be careful." Pan Ruo did not touch the exorcism pestle. The tip of the sword was pointed at the flaw of the exorcism pestle. Ouch! Kongchan was stunned. Then, he circled the exorcism pestle and wanted to hit Pan Ruo. However, Zhang Xiaohua's Pan Ruo was like a fish in water. It pierced Kongchan's back through the gap and did not entangle with the exorcism pestle. Therefore, there was no sound of weapons clashing on the field. The two changed their method of fighting force with force. The two weapons did not touch each other again. Outside the field, Great Master Chang Gung's face was a little ugly. He said in a low voice, "Ren Xiaoxia is really smart." He found Kongchan's weakness after fighting for a while. Although Kongchan seems to be lifting heavy weights easily, he actually consumes a lot of energy. If he continues to fight like this, he will lose in the end. Great Master Chang Xing smiled. With Abbess Jingyi's temperament, she must have told him earlier. There's nothing to be surprised about. He's just a kid. If he didn't have someone to guide him, how could he see the clues? Didn't you see how Kongchan wields the exorcism pestle like a lamp? Who knows if he can hold on for long? Back then, Abbess Jingyi was also forced to use the qinggong of the incense cult. Luckily, she found the exorcism pestle's weakness. But, if that's the case, Ren Xiaoyao should have started to fight when he first entered the array. Great Master Chang Xing ignored him. He looked at the field and murmured, "I didn't expect Abbess Jingyi to be so narrow-minded. It's been so many years and she still remembers this. If we had known earlier, we would have changed our method. We can only use the old method in a hurry." Hee. Using the old method is enough to show the mercy of our Dalan Temple. If Ren Xiaoyao can pass the 3 trials, it can be considered our Dalan Temple's generosity. It can make up for Abbess Jingyi's face. If he can't pass the 3 trials, then Abbess Jingyi will have nothing to say. The disciples of the incense cult will also become the laughingstock of Jianghu. This Ren Xiaoyao is also cunning. He actually wanted to peek into our sutra depository. Senior Marshal Brother, do you think this is Abbess Jingyi's order? Maybe, but I think this Ren Xiaoyao is also strange. It's obvious that his internal energy is strong. He blocked the Arhat Aray's long rod and the exorcism pestle, but why didn't he use Qinggong? Back then, Abbess Jingyi relied entirely on the incense cult's Qinggong. Could it be that the incense cult's Qinggong isn't good enough for him? Or maybe he doesn't think it's suitable, so he wants to look for it in our Dalan temple. If he's a disciple of the Dalan temple, of course he has the Qinggong to practice. He's just a disciple from another sect. How can our Dalan temple give away our sect's Qinggong? What we promised him was only the sword and staff techniques. We won't accept anything else. Well, then we'll have to see who can last until the end, Ren Xiaoyao or Kongchan. Let's hope Kongchan can hold on. Sigh, there hasn't been any abnormalities in the Forbidden Wind Valley for a long time. Why did it suddenly change today? If it doesn't work, we'll have to think of other ways for the third round. Well, this Ren Xiaoyao's internal energy is amazing. We can only restrain him in the Forbidden Wind Valley. But who knows if he has other secret techniques? We can only rely on the Forbidden Wind Valley. The two looked at the arena and whispered. After a while, the situation in the arena changed again. Kongchan's face turned green and gradually turned pale. The weight of the exorcism pestle also decreased slightly. If it was someone else, they might not be able to distinguish these changes. However, Zhang Xiaohua had been observing carefully, and with his divine sense probing from time to time, he had already noticed it. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua revealed a trace of a smile and shouted for the second time, "Senior brother Kongchan, you have to be careful." As he spoke, he leapt up and raised Hanya high into the air. It was the heaven-shocking staff technique. Hanya was like a shooting star rising from the horizon. It streaked across the sky and landed on the demon-subduing pestle. With a pung sound, Kongchan felt his hand sink. The exorcism pestle had increased in weight. Before he could pull out the exorcism pestle and change his technique, Zhang Xiaohua shouted again. Hanya was raised again and slammed down heavily. This time, Kongchan felt even more uncomfortable. The exorcism pestle had increased in weight by several times. Immediately after, without waiting for Kongchan to react, Zhang Xiaohua attacked again and again. They were all heaven-shocking staff techniques, forcing Kongchan to use the exorcism pestle to defend himself. The exorcism pestle in Kongchan's hand became several times heavier. After a dozen strikes, Kongchan's hand trembled. He almost lost his grip on the exorcism pestle. He quickly retreated and hugged the exorcism pestle in his arms. He put his palms together and said, "Benefactor Ren's strength is amazing. This poor monk is ashamed of his inferiority." Hearing Kongchan admit defeat, Zhang Xiaohua threw Hanya to the ground and sat down again. He let out a long sigh and said, "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Kongchan, for helping me. To tell you the truth, this junior is already exhausted. If Senior Marshal Brother had held on for a few more strikes, this junior would have thrown in the sword and admitted defeat." At this time, Kongchan's face was pale with a hint of green. The green light on the exorcism pestle had also faded. The various talismans on the exorcism pestle had also dimmed. Kongchan shook his head and said, "Even so, this poor monk can no longer continue. Benefactor Run is still more skilled than this poor monk. Admirable, admirable." At this time, Master Changxing and Great Master Changgung also walked over and said, "Young benefactor is indeed powerful. You are indeed worthy of being the guardian disciple appointed by Abbess Jingyi." That day, Abbess Jingyi fought for half a day before she exhausted the guardian disciple. Sure enough, Zhang Xiaohua secretly said, but he said modestly, "How can this disciple compare to Lord Hierarch? Lord Hierarch won without shedding a drop of blood. This junior was covered in stinky sweat and exhausted by luck. It's incomparable, incomparable." Master Changxing asked, "Young benefactor, do you want to challenge the third trial?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Master, I came here as a diplomatic envoy, not to provoke you. I also don't intend to throw my life away in the Dalan Temple. You see, it's still early, so let me rest a bit more. Hee, that's easy. Young benefactor, please rest. This old monk will go and prepare. After 2 hours, I will send a disciple to bring you two over. Go over? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, Not in this square? Yes, the third trial is in another place. Master Chang Xing didn't seem to intend to explain. Zhang Xiaohua chatted with Ming for a while and drank some tea. She looked at the sun in the west and 2 hours passed quickly. Monk Kongchan changed into a green monk robe and came over with a smile. Benefactor Ren, have you rested well? It's about time. How is senior brother? Haha, thank you for your mercy, almsgiver Ren. I'm just a little exhausted. I'll be fine after taking some pills. Looking at Kongchan's slightly flushed face, Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, The Dalan Temple's medicinal pills are also famous. I'll have to ask senior brother to send me some later. That's easy to say. When Benefactor Ren leaves, I'll definitely present it. Kongchan smiled and said, Now, please follow this poor monk. -4. Chapter 984. Where is the third test? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. After thinking for a moment, Kongchan whispered, The third test is in the Forbidden Wind Valley of the other temple. Forbidden Wind Valley? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, Why is it placed there? Kongchan smiled mysteriously and did not answer. At this time, the setting sun was as red as blood. Under Kongchan's lead, Zhang Xiaohua and Ming came to a valley. They saw that the valley was bare without any trees or flowers. Even the stones on the ground were not small. They were all huge. The most peculiar thing was that the surface of these stones was not like the usual. The surface was round and looked very smooth, but when you touched it, there were many fine marks. The two of you, please come this way. Kongchan put her palms together and whispered. She led the two into the valley. After walking for an incense stick's worth of time, they came to a small open space. At this time, there were many people standing in the open space. In addition to Master Changxing and Great Master Changgang, there was a big man who was half a body taller than Zhang Xiaohua. This big man was not only tall, but also had a lot of meat on his body. Except for a few places that were wrapped in cloth, the rest of his body was naked. A layer of oil flashed on his naked body. Under the light of the setting sun, the thick meat on his body jumped, showing the strength of his body. His bald head was also shiny with oil. When the big man saw Zhang Xiaohua coming, he frowned slightly and reached out to touch his shiny head. His hand was like a palm leaf fan, and his fingers were almost as thick as a radish. Seeing this big man, the monk standing next to Great Master Changgang, Zhang Xiaohua did not need to look carefully. This big man must be her opponent for the third test. Woo! A cold wind blew from the valley, making Zhang Xiaohua involuntarily shrink her neck. The other monks in the valley had a slight change in expression. Seeing this, Kongchan hurried a few steps and said, reporting to the two martial uncles, Ren Xiaoyao, a guardian disciple of the Incense Order, and Zi Xia, an inner disciple of Mo Xiangong, are here. Then, he stood to the side. Master Changxing looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said with a smile, Benefactor Ren, have you rested well? Has your internal energy recovered? Inner force? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately cupped his hands and said, Many thanks for Master's understanding. Everything has been restored. Master, please guide the third round. That's good. Master Changxing nodded. He pointed to the big man next to him and said, This is my Dalan Temple's guardian Vajra Kong Ju. He will be your opponent for the third trial. Greetings, Benefactor Ren. Kong Ju put his palms together and said in a muffled voice, Greetings, senior brother Kong Ju. Zhang Xiaohua returned the greeting with a smile. After seeing senior martial brother Kongju's appearance, I feel ashamed of my own inferiority. I don't have the heart to fight anymore. Ha ha ha, Kong laughed loudly, and the flesh on his body trembled like flowing water. Almsgiver Ren, Great Master Changgang said, The third stage isn't a competition of strength or ruthlessness. You don't have to worry. You don't have to say anything now. You will know when you enter. Zhang Xiaohua was even more shocked inside. After Master Changgang finished speaking, He dodged to the side and revealed a gap that was about the height of 2 people behind him. He pointed his finger and said, "It's here." Zhang Xiaohua was expressionless as she looked at the narrow gap between the mountain rocks. It was very deep, and there wasn't much light passing through. She couldn't see the situation inside. Then, forget it. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to say something but hesitated. She would know everything once she entered. "Master, please go first," Zhang Xiaohua said. "All right." Master Changxing didn't decline and entered through the narrow gap. Great Master Changgung didn't move and gestured for Zhang Xiaohua to go first. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and let Zhang Xiaohua go first. The narrow gap was very long, and it took the time it took to brew a cup of tea to cross it. After passing through the gap, there was a ruin that was about 400 to 500 feet in size. This ruin was slightly different from the fragrant cult's Wanqiu. There was a platform that was about the height of a person, and there were many large and thick stone pillars evenly distributed. The top of the stone pillars was empty, and they pierced the sky. There were many broken rocks, glazed tiles, and green bricks on the platform that were piled up messily. Master Changxing didn't explain and walked up a slanted staircase to the platform. There was a narrow path that led to the center of the ruin. As soon as Zhang Xiaohua stepped on the platform, she immediately felt that something was wrong. The true qi in her meridians was supposed to hide her cultivation and stay dormant, but at this moment, it was really stagnant. Moreover, as Zhang Xiaohua went deeper into the center of the platform, her true qi became more and more immobile. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to use her true qi because she was behind Master Changxing, she could clearly feel that there was a restriction on the platform that could imprison a person's cultivation. When she followed Master Changxing to the center of the platform, there was an open space with a radius of 10 feet. Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood why Abbess Jingyi was defeated in this trial. At this moment, the true qi in Zhang Xiaohua's meridians had already solidified. She couldn't control or mobilize her true qi as she wished. Zhang Xiaohua also risked releasing her divine sense, but no matter what, she couldn't separate it from her body. She then looked at the bronze cauldron and thought about the burly man behind it. Needless to say, this trial was definitely a competition of strength. The restriction on the platform could imprison true qi, so presumably, it also had an effect on internal energy. In that case, Abbess Jingyi's internal energy, which she had painstakingly cultivated, wouldn't be of any use. Any qi practitioner or martial arts expert who came here would be the same as an ordinary person. They would have to rely on their own strength to do the talking. Not to mention this burly man who had painstakingly cultivated his strength. Even an ordinary Jianghu man would have more strength than Abbess Jingyi. Thinking about how Abbess Jingyi's martial arts were outstanding, yet she actually lost to an ordinary Dalan Temple monk in this Forbidden Wind Valley. How could she swallow this humiliation? When everyone arrived, Master Changxing said with a smile, "Benefactorin, now that you're here, you should have a clear idea of the situation, right? Our Dalan Temple's path is different from that of the incense sect's martial arts. We walk the path of Yang. The Dalan Temple's guardian disciples have to train their strength from a young age. They have to draw water from a distant mountain spring without spilling a single drop on the way. Then, they have to practice the Dalan Temple's special body tempering technique to increase their strength. Finally, they can practice our Dalan Temple's immortal cultivation technique and wield the demon-subduing pestle. Presumably, after passing the first 2 trials, young benefactor will understand that strength is indispensable among our Dalan Temple's guardian disciples. All of the challenges are based on strength. Although young benefactor was different from your esteemed Abbess Jingyi in that you didn't use your lightness technique and relied on your profound internal energy to pass the first 2 trials, the last trial will test young benefactor's physical strength. Young benefactor must have used his internal energy. On this platform, all forms of internal energy are useless. This disciple understands. Zhang Xiaohua bowed and said, "It means that I have to compete with Senior Kongju in terms of strength without using my internal energy?" Yes. Not only can young benefactor's internal energy not be used, but this old monk and the others can't use their internal energy either. Therefore, young benefactor doesn't need to worry about fairness. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua nod, Master Changxing took out a small bell from his bosom and said, This old monk has an immortal inheritance magic tool. It's a set with the evil subduing cauldron. Young benefactor must know the divine abilities of immortal inheritance magic tools. This evil subduing cauldron weighs 5,000 jin. Every time this old monk strikes this small bell, the weight of the evil subduing cauldron increases by 1,000 jin. There's such a miraculous thing? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and looked curiously at the small bell in Great Master Chonggung's hand. Although Zhang Xiaohua was strong, this strength came from cultivating the fist of the North Star and using the warm current to temper the bones in his body. It was pure physical strength. When he was fighting with Kong Chan, he already felt that it was amazing when he saw the evil subduing pestle changing its weight with mana. Now that he saw this small bell increase its weight by 1,000 jin with a single strike, he was even more surprised. Apart from being surprised, he thought more about his own Prajna heavy sword. This sword weighed more than 10,000 jin and couldn't be controlled by his divine sense. It was obvious that it was different from the evil subduing pestle in terms of its weight. Then, what was it that could be so heavy? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but look forward to it. Moreover, he gradually had a vague idea in his mind. This idea sounded a little unimaginable now. Whether it would work or not, he would have to wait until Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation level gradually increased before he could verify it. Benefactor Ren, don't be surprised. There are thousands of Buddhist techniques that are shocking. This is just a simple practical method. Great Master Chonggung smiled and said, the test for this stage is simple. Junior Kongju and Benefactor Ren will each step forward and take turns lifting the same weight. I will wait for both of you to lift the evil subduing cauldron and increase its weight until one of you can no longer lift it. Haha, what if both of you can't lift it in the end? Zhang Xiaohua laughed. That's easy. Great Master Chonggung squinted and said, I will strike the bell again and reduce the weight of the evil subduing cauldron by 100. Meng pursed her lips and smiled. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, Buddhist artifacts are indeed powerful. Then, he cupped his hands and said to Kongju, Senior Kongju, as the host, you should go first. Let me see how you lift it. Humph, Kongju snorted and strode forward. His footsteps were so heavy that the platform shook a few times. Kongju walked to the front of the evil subduing cauldron, bent down, and grabbed the legs of the cauldron. He tested it and shouted, Rise! The huge evil subduing cauldron rose in response. It seemed effortless. Then, Kongju lifted the cauldron. After a while, he put it down on the platform with a bang. Fortunately, the platform was very clean and there was no dust. Under Great Master Chonggung's smiling gaze, Kongju walked back to his seat and looked at Zhang Xiaohua from the corner of his eyes. He seemed to be provoking her. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't stand on ceremony and walked to the front of the evil subduing cauldron. She bent down, leaned forward, and held the evil subduing cauldron with one hand. She didn't even bother to shout rise. She just gritted her teeth, and the evil subduing cauldron was lifted up with a whoosh. Master Chonggung's eyes flashed with a strange light when he saw how easy it was to lift something heavy. He was extremely surprised. After Zhang Xiaohua put the cauldron on the ground, Great Master Chonggung nodded and said, Abbess Jing Yi is indeed meticulous. It must have been hard on her. Then, he picked up the small bell and it rang with a dong. -4. Chapter 985. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't leave her body, so she couldn't see the changes in the qi of heaven and earth around the evil suppression cauldron. She couldn't see any changes in the cauldron with her naked eyes. After the bell rang, Kongju stopped underestimating his opponent and walked up to the evil suppression cauldron. Just like before, he lifted the cauldron above his head. However, when he returned to his original position, he nodded at Zhang Xiaohua politely, indicating that it was his turn. There was no provocation in his eyes. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. She walked up to the cauldron and lifted it with one hand. When she put the cauldron down, she turned to Kongju and said, Senior Kongju, adding 500 kilograms at a time seems too slow. I think we should ask Master Chongqing to strike the cauldron 10 times at a time and add another 10,000 kilograms. What do you think? Kongju was a little embarrassed. After thinking for a while, He gritted his teeth and said, "Junior brother Ren, what do you think? Adding another 2,500 kilograms at a time? Oh, that's fine. I just think it's too slow to add it bit by bit. 2,500 kilograms is fine too." Zhang Xiaohua agreed. Master Chongqing sighed. The small bell in his hand moved rapidly, and he struck it 5 times in a row. According to Master Chongqing's explanation, the evil suppression cauldron should weigh 11,000 kilograms. After you, Senior Kongju. Zhang Xiaohua moved to the side. Kongju walked up to the evil suppression cauldron. He wasn't as relaxed as before. First, he moved his wrists a little. Then, he took a deep breath and grabbed the legs of the cauldron with both hands. After testing it, he shouted, "Rise." Then, he lifted the cauldron above his head. However, when he put it down this time, he wasn't as relaxed as before. It was almost as if he had thrown it to the ground. Okay, it's almsgiver Ren's turn. Kongju let out a long sigh and moved to the side. Zhang Xiaohua walked up to the evil suppression cauldron. She still used her left hand to test it. After thinking for a while, she stretched out her right hand and grabbed the legs of the cauldron. She took a deep breath and lifted the cauldron. Zhang Xiaohua's lifting process was similar to Kongju's, but when she put it down, the difference was obvious. Just like before, she slowly put it down. Dang, 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 dang. Another 5 bells rang out, and the weight of the evil suppressing cauldron increased to 16,000 jin. At this moment, Kongju's face showed that he was in a difficult position. His arms had the strength of 15,000 kilograms, which was rare in the world. He originally thought that he could lift it 10 times in a row, but no matter how strong Zhang Xiaohua was, looking at Kongju's thin and tall figure, it was impossible for her to lift it 5 times. Who would have thought that the other party would ask him to add 10,000 kilograms, and he could only agree to add 5,000 kilograms? After adding it twice, he had already exceeded his limit. This evil suppressing cauldron was no longer something he could lift. Kongju glanced at Master Chongqing. Master Chongqing nodded slightly as if to encourage him. Hence, Kongju walked up to the evil suppressing cauldron, took a deep breath, bent down, and grabbed the huge cauldron in his hands. He tested it with both hands and shouted loudly, raising the cauldron in front of him. However, just as he tried to lift the cauldron above his head, he was exhausted and couldn't move anymore. With a loud bang, the evil suppressing cauldron was thrown to the ground by Kongju, making a loud noise. Kongju's face was flushed red. He looked at Master Chongqing and returned to his original position. "All right, Benefactor Ren, if you can lift this evil suppressing cauldron, you will pass the 3rd test and avenge your sect master," Master Chongqing said. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. "Since Senior Kongju couldn't lift it, I might not be able to either. Hence, I will have to trouble Master Chongqing to reduce the weight of the evil suppressing cauldron so that Kongju and I can lift it again." Go ahead. There's no harm in it." Master Chongqing waved his hand. "It's just a few more knocks, which will consume a little more magic power." Magic power? When Zhang Xiaohua heard that, she understood that the weight of the evil suppressing cauldron wasn't for nothing. Zhang Xiaohua put on a good show. First, she walked to the front of the evil suppressing cauldron. Just like before, she tried a few times before she used her strength to lift it. Kongju's eyes were wide open, and his heart was in his throat. He hoped that Zhang Xiaohua could do the same thing as him. Unfortunately, although Zhang Xiaohua lifted it with difficulty, her face was flushed, and her veins were bulging. She was still able to lift it above her head. She even managed to stand up unsteadily. Sigh, Kongju sighed in his heart. However, when Zhang Xiaohua put down the evil suppressing cauldron, his eyes lit up. He clearly saw that although Zhang Xiaohua had thrown the evil suppressing cauldron to the ground like him, it didn't bounce a few times like he did. Instead, it was very obedient and didn't move an inch. It was as if Zhang Xiaohua had gently put it down. Tisk! Kongju couldn't help but gasp. He thought to himself, he looks like he's not much older than Kongjian. He doesn't have much flesh on his body, but he's actually so strong. Moreover, he's so considerate of others. That's not bad. But his strength, where did he train it from? Could it be that he was really born with divine strength? Kong Ju sighed in his heart. However, he still stepped forward and put his palms together. He said sincerely, Benefactor Ren's divine strength is amazing. This poor monk humbly admits defeat. Zhang Xiaohua wiped the sweat off her forehead with her hand and smiled. Senior Kongju, I was really lucky. I talked so much with Master Changxing just now because I wanted to recover my strength. Senior, please don't blame me. Kongju didn't expose her and was about to speak. Meng Han walked over with a smile. When she saw Zhang Xiaohua raise the evil-suppressing cauldron, she almost jumped up. This was a secret competition between the two super sects, the Fragrant Cult and the Dalan Temple. It was also a matter of Nun Jingyi's reputation. If Zhang Xiaohua won, there would be no need to mention the benefits. Therefore, she couldn't help but say, Congratulations, Junior Brother Ren. Before Zhang Xiaohua could speak, a strange cold wind blew from beside the evil-suppressing cauldron. It was the same as before, but this time, the wind was much stronger. The cold wind blew from below and lifted Meng's veil, revealing her true face. Yu, Great Master Changgung, who was standing beside Kongju, was a little annoyed. When he saw Meng's face, his expression changed. He raised his arm and pointed at Meng's face, saying in shock, You? Why are you here? However, as soon as he finished speaking, Great Master Changgung came to his senses and immediately shut his mouth. Although he was still shocked, his eyes were filled with confusion and doubt. Meng also looked at Great Master Changgung in shock. She pulled down her veil and asked excitedly, Chang, Great Master Changgung, have you seen me before? Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She didn't bother talking to Kongju and walked up to Master Changgung. She bowed and asked, Master, have you seen my senior sister Zixia before? When was it? Where was it? Please tell me the truth. By this time, Great Master Changgung had regained his composure. Although there was doubt in his eyes, he still shook his head and said, Young Benefactor Zixia, I have never seen her before, but you just saw Zixia, wasn't she? Haha, young Benefactor, you misunderstood. I have seen someone who looked like Benefactor Zixia before, but that was many years ago. How could it be Benefactor Zixia? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua was even more overjoyed. He immediately asked, Master, where did you see it? Who was she? Please tell me. Yes, Great Master Changgung. Can you tell me where you saw someone who looked like me? This Great Master Changgung seemed to be in a difficult position. He looked at Master Changxing and said, That was 40 years ago. I was still a disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall at that time. But this matter involves the Dalan Temple. Forgive me for not being able to. Zhang Xiaohua was anxious. She bowed to the ground and said, Master, this matter is very important to my senior sister Zixia. Please tell me. Zixia also hurriedly bowed and said, Master, this matter concerns my origin. Please be merciful. This Great Master Changgung shook his head and said, Isn't this making things difficult for me? Master Changxing thought for a while and said, Young benefactors, don't be anxious. This matter concerns the Dalan Temple, so we have to carefully consider it. Benefactor Ren has passed the 3 tests and is about to go to the temple to see Abbot Changsheng and present the invitation card to him. I also have to report the matter of young benefactor entering the Sutra Depository to read the secret manuals. Junior Brother Changgung can report this matter to the abbot and let him make a decision. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohua praised, That's great, that's how it should be. Meng also nodded slightly. All right, we'll go out and let Benefactor Zixia wait outside the temple for the time being. Young Benefactor Ren, please follow us into the temple. Meng was waiting under the tree outside the Dalan Temple. Zhang Xiaohua followed the 2 masters into the Dalan Temple. Although this Dalan Temple was similar to the Dalan Temple in front of the mountain and had incense and candles and Buddha, there were many wandering and cultivating monks here. There were no traces of pilgrims. Moreover, the buildings in this temple were more magnificent. The sculptures and murals were more simple and unadorned. Even the commonly seen green bricks under their feet revealed the vicissitudes of time. Zhang Xiaohua and the other 2 walked through several halls and finally turned to a secluded place. Before Master Chang Xing opened the door of a small hut, a divine sense swept out from inside the hut. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She activated the nameless formula and carefully concealed her cultivation and divine sense. Sure enough, the divine sense hovered in front of Zhang Xiaohua a few times and then retracted. Abbot, we've brought Benefactor Ren Xiaoyao from the incense cult to deliver the invitation card. Master Chang Xing stood at the door and whispered, "Come in." An old and peaceful voice sounded. Yes, Master Chang Xing responded and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Benefactor Ren, please come in." With that, Master Chang Xing pushed the door open and led Zhang Xiaohua into the house. Great Master Chang Gung followed closely behind. Inside the small house, there was a portrait, a bookshelf, and a few meditation mats. On one of the meditation mats sat an old monk with extremely long and white eyebrows. Zhang Xiaohua sized up the layout of the room and immediately went forward to bow. "Greetings, Master Changsheng." -4. Chapter 986. A gentle force supported Zhang Xiaohua and stopped him from kowtowing. "You don't have to be so courteous. Young Benefactor Ren, please forgive me for being too simple." Master Chang Sheng's voice was unusually amiable and pleasant to listen to. Zhang Xiaohua was convinced and said, "It's my great fortune to be able to meet you. How can I be so calculative about such things?" "Haha, good. Young Benefactor Ren may be young, but you are experienced in dealing with people. It's no wonder that you were able to receive the favor of your esteemed leader and deliver the invitation on behalf of a direct disciple." "It's nothing," Zhang Xiaohua said humbly. "It's all because I have some strength. Only the esteemed leader sent me here." "Oh?" Master Chang Sheng was puzzled. "Hee, it's like this." Master Chang Xing stepped forward and explained the matter in detail. In the end, he explained, without the abbot's permission, this poor monk acted on his own accord. "Please punish me, abbot." "Haha." The abbot smiled and waved his hand. "Junior, you're wrong. All the martial arts in the world originate from the Great Forest. The martial arts of the Dalan Temple are meant for everyone to cultivate." Although young Benefactor Ren is a disciple of the fragrant religion, Zhang Xiaohua was delighted when he heard this, but he was immediately disappointed. Master Chang Sheng continued, "Although we can't let him cultivate the secret inner strength cultivation method of the Dalan Temple, there's no harm in letting him take a look at ordinary fist techniques and sword techniques." However, Zhang Xiaohua still thanked him. He wanted to learn about the Dharma swordsmanship in advance, but he was afraid that the great Master Changgung would be suspicious. Therefore, he could only keep it a secret. After receiving Master Chang Sheng's approval, Master Chang Sheng heaved a sigh of relief. Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to take out the jade slip and handed it over respectfully. He said, "This is the invitation that my esteemed leader sent me to deliver. Please accept it." Master Chang Sheng nodded. "You've worked hard to deliver this invitation. How can I not accept it?" As he spoke, he took the jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it. After a while, he raised his white eyebrows and asked, "Young Benefactor Ren, has your fragrant cult's sect protecting array been completely destroyed?" "Yes, Master Chang Sheng." Zhang Xiaohua then told him about the incense cult. Master Chang Sheng frowned slightly. After a while, he sighed and said, "It's fate. People in Jianghu have no choice, even if." Then, he chanted the name of Buddha and said self-mockingly, "As an outsider, I've made a fool of myself in front of you." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Master is merciful. In the spirit of, if I don't go to hell, who will? Being in the Jianghu is really beyond my reach." Then, he glanced at the great Master Changgung, who was standing beside him with his head lowered. He probed, "Changxing Abbot, I'm slow-witted. There's one more thing that I need your approval for. Is there anything else?" The elder asked with a smile. At this moment, Great Master Changgung raised his head and said, "Senior Abbot, I know what Benefactor Ren wants. It involves the secrets of the Dalan Temple." "Oh?" The elder was taken aback. He turned to Zhang Xiaohua and said, "In that case, would you please wait outside for a while?" Zhang Xiaohua quickly got up and cupped her hands. "This matter involves my senior sister Zixa's past. If possible, I hope Master can be merciful." The elder nodded slightly and smiled without saying anything. Zhang Xiaohua left the simple meditation room and stood outside. He waited for about half a meal. During this time, he wanted to release his divine sense several times to see what was going on inside. He also wanted to burrow into the ground and listen to what was being said. However, he was afraid of being discovered by the elder. More importantly, he was afraid of angering the Dalan temple. They didn't need to punish him. They only needed to politely say, "I'm sorry, this is a secret of the Dalan temple. It can't be told to outsiders." Well, his dream of finding out about his origins was once again lost. Perhaps Zhang Xiaohua could restrain Great Master Chang'eng and use the bewitching finger to force him to confess. However, if the Tenryu sect's spy could escape the bewitching finger, how could the Dalan temple not be able to do the same? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was thinking and scratching her head, the door of the meditation room opened. Master Changxing and Great Master Chang'eng came out. Zhang Xiaohua jumped over and asked anxiously, "Master, why?" Great Master Chang'eng smiled and said, "Abbot is merciful and has approved it. However, this matter happened a long time ago. Let me think about it carefully before informing you." Zhang Xiaohua was pleasantly surprised and quickly bowed. "Thank you, Master. Young benefactor doesn't need to be so courteous. Abbot has said that there's no need to thank him in person. A monk should be considerate. In addition, Abbot will definitely attend the martial arts assembly of your esteemed sect. Young benefactor can go back and report this to Shirtai Jing-yi." "Thank you, Master." Zhang Xiaohua stood outside the door and bowed deeply toward the meditation room. However, a gentle force came from inside the room, supporting him and preventing him from bowing. Although this force wasn't worth mentioning to Zhang Xiaohua hesitated for a moment before standing up respectfully. "That's enough, young benefactor. Abbot doesn't allow you to thank him, so you don't need to thank him. Why do you need to be so formal?" Master Changxing smiled and said, "You'd better follow me to the sutra depository and find your sword techniques, fist techniques, and so on. We'll talk about it later." After finding clues to Meng's origins, Zhang Xiaohua was no longer as enthusiastic about sword techniques, fist techniques, and staff techniques. Thinking about Meng, who was waiting outside the temple, Zhang Xiaohua probed, "Can I go outside the temple first and tell Senior Martial Sister Zixia about this matter?" Master Changxing waved his hand. "This matter isn't urgent. Just find a disciple and tell him about it. I'll send you to the sutra depository. I still have other matters to attend to." Zhang Xiaohua happily said, "Thank you, Master." Soon after, he thought of another matter and asked, "That's right. Before I came to the Dalan temple, the sect leader repeatedly urged me to pay my respects to Grandmaster Yuantian if possible. Should I report this to Grandmaster Changsheng?" "That's easy. I'll report this to Abbot in a moment. Before young benefactor leaves, you can go to the Pagoda Forest." "The Pagoda Forest?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Before he could ask, Master Changxing had already walked ahead, as if Zhang Xiaohua should know something about the Pagoda Forest. He followed Master Changxing to the front of an extremely ordinary pavilion. A gray-robed monk came out to welcome them. Master Changxing pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "This is Ren Xiaoyao, the messenger of the fragrant religion. The abbot has decreed that you can choose a sword technique, palm technique, or any other ordinary secret manual to read in the sutra depository. You can't take it out of the sutra depository, and you can't copy it." "Yes, I'll comply with the abbot's decree. Benefactor, this way please," the monk said with a salute. "This is the sutra depository?" Zhang Xiaohua asked in astonishment as he looked at the ordinary sutra depository. "Young benefactor Ren, what do you think the sutra depository looks like?" Master Changxing asked with a smile. "This, no matter what, there should be monks with high martial arts as guards. No matter what, there should be." Zhang Xiaohua almost blurted out the appearance of the Misty School's sutra depository. "Haha, young benefactor, you're thinking too much." Master Changxing said, "Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. No one said that the sutra depository has to be a solemn image." Master Changxing then waved his hand and said, "This old monk still has other matters to attend to. After Benefactor Ren finishes reading the secret manual, this old monk will send you on your way." "Send me on my way?" Zhang Xiaohua secretly curled her lips. This sentence seems to have two meanings. I don't dare to nag Master. Master, please do as you wish. After Master Chang Xing left, Zhang Xiaohua followed the monk into the sutra depository. The sutra depository wasn't big. It was only 20 feet in size. There was a small wooden ladder in the corner that led to the second floor. Zhang Xiaohua knew that the second floor wasn't something she could go up by herself, so she didn't look there. The monk led Zhang Xiaohua to a row of bookshelves, pointed at them, and said respectfully, Benefactor Run. This row contains our sect's collection of sword techniques, palm techniques, fist techniques, staff techniques, and so on. Benefactor Ren, please choose one. This poor monk will wait for you here. Zhang Xiaohua understood immediately. She smiled and said, Thank you, Master. This one understands. Then, Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense slightly. She used her eyes to look at the books while using her divine sense to distinguish them. Unfortunately, just as Master Chang Xing had said, these were all ordinary secret manuals from the Dalan Temple. Zhang Xiaohua searched the entire bookshelf but couldn't find any fluctuation of the Tao of Immortals. Unknowingly, when Zhang Xiaohua randomly selected a secret manual, she released her divine sense and shrouded the entire sutra depository. She checked every bookshelf one by one. Just as she was filled with disappointment and was about to use her divine sense to look at the wooden ladder again, her eyes inadvertently swept past and she was stunned on the spot. He saw a thin and short old monk dressed in gray robes. He had a hunched back and was holding an old broom in his hand. He stood beside the wooden ladder and was meticulously sweeping the ground with his head lowered. Whoosh! Blood rushed to Zhang Xiaohua's head. She scanned the area with her divine sense again in disbelief. Still, she couldn't find any trace of the old monk. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to force her way in and quickly retracted her divine sense. Even the thought of forcing her way into the sutra depository at night was dispelled. After pretending to search for a while, Zhang Xiaohua asked as if nothing had happened, Master, who is the master sweeping the floor in front of the wooden ladder? Hearing Zhang Xiaohua mention the old monk, the disciple was stunned. He looked at the monk in the distance and said softly, This one doesn't know the Grand Master's Dharma name. This one only knows that he has been sweeping the floor in the sutra depository for as long as I can remember. Then, he said respectfully, also, I heard from the martial uncles that they have seen him sweeping the floor since they could remember. As for his Dharma name and age, no one knows. Oh, Zhang Xiaohua nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps only the head elder would know the origin of this old monk. Since there was such a mysterious person overseeing the sutra depository, not to mention others, even Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to covet it. How could the Dalan Temple not be reassured? Why are there still monks outside the door? Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua withdrew her divine sense and concentrated on looking for the secret books with her naked eyes. -4. Chapter 987. The Dalan Temple's collection was indeed powerful. Although there weren't many fist manuals, sword manuals, and staff techniques, they were all exquisite. At least, Zhang Xiaohua had never heard of any of them. After searching for a long time, his gaze finally landed on a booklet at the top of the bookshelf titled Tong Tian Staff Technique. Actually, there wasn't anything special about it. It was just that Zhang Xiaohua had previously read Refining the World and recently read Sword Performing the World, so he was very curious about this Tian. That bookshelf was very high. Even with Zhang Xiaohua's tall and thin figure, he could barely reach it. And the booklet was covered in dust, indicating that very few people had read this secret manual. Didn't Zhang Xiaohua like to look for things that others didn't want? Hee, benefactor, please don't blame me. This bookshelf is really too high. This poor monk's height is limited, so it's not convenient for me to reach it. The monk saw the dust on the booklet and explained shyly, It's fine, it's fine. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand. Benefactor, please come here. The monk said embarrassedly. He extended his hand and invited Zhang Xiaohua to the front of the praying mat in the corner. He pointed to the praying mat and said, This is where this disciple meditates on the secret manual. This book cannot be brought out of the sutra depository. Benefactor, please meditate on it here. Okay. Zhang Xiaohua sat down cross-legged. The monk bowed and left. Zhang Xiaohua opened the Tong Tian staff technique book and saw that it recorded the moves of this staff technique. It was very clear. But when Zhang Xiaohua concentrated on reading it for a while, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. Although this staff technique was magical, it was only relatively speaking. If it was an ordinary person in the pugilistic world, they would treat it as a treasure. But for Zhang Xiaohua, it was really good to look at but useless. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Just as she was about to close the secret manual, a gentle voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Young benefactor, why are you sighing? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Seeing the old monk standing beside him, he hurriedly stood up and saluted. I wanted to look for a script in the Sutras depository of the Dalan temple that was similar to the demon-subduing pestle used by the protector of the temple, but I couldn't find it after searching for a long time. You see, it wasn't easy for me to find one that was faded, but it's not suitable for me. As he spoke, he handed over the heaven-piercing staff technique and probed. Perhaps Grandmaster has something to recommend? The old monk didn't even look at his secret manual. He shook his head and said, Young benefactor, is it for that sword embryo of yours? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately said respectfully, That's right, Grandmaster. Please help me, Grandmaster. Help? The old monk shook his head. This poor monk has been sweeping the floor of the Sutras depository for many years. But this is the first time I've met someone who is fated to be like you. This poor monk has read all the secret manuals in the Sutras depository, and only this one is suitable for you. Benefactor, you have chosen well, but the way you read it is not suitable. As the saying goes, immortals are fated to be immortals. How can an ordinary person find it with the naked eye? After he finished speaking, the old monk picked up the broom and lowered his head to remember to sweep the floor. Zhang Xiaohua's face was filled with respect. He bowed and sat down cross-legged. At this moment, he didn't need to look at it with his naked eye. He only released his divine sense and enveloped the secret manual. After a long while, he felt that the human figure in the secret manual was moving, displaying the staff technique from the beginning to the end. However, the moves of the staff technique were completely different from what was recorded in the secret manual. For the next few days, Zhang Xiaohua came to the Sutras depository and opened the heaven-piercing staff technique manual. Then, he sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to comprehend it. In the end, even the old monk who was sweeping the floor was surprised. He thought that Zhang Xiaohua's talent was limited and couldn't fully comprehend it. In fact, even the mysterious old monk didn't know that when Zhang Xiaohua first memorized the staff technique in the secret manual and then immersed his divine sense into the secret manual, the staff technique displayed by the human figure in the secret manual was completely different. It was obviously another set of staff techniques. In a day, Zhang Xiaohua actually saw 9 different sets of the heaven-piercing staff technique. Of course, this wasn't the most bizarre part. When Zhang Xiaohua accompanied Ming to rest outside the temple at night, he woke up in the morning. In yesterday's 9 sets of heaven-piercing staff technique, most of the moves were forgotten. It was just like when he practiced the Big Dipper magical fist. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was no longer as ignorant as before. He knew that he had picked up a treasure. This heaven-piercing staff technique might not be as simple as what was recorded in the secret manual. Sure enough, on the second day, Zhang Xiaohua saw 9 different sets of staff techniques. However, the 10th set didn't appear. On the morning of the 3rd day, there were only a few moves left in his mind. Therefore, for 9 days, Zhang Xiaohua actually saw 81 sets of staff techniques from the heaven-piercing staff technique manual. Finally, in his mind, there were only 360 moves of the staff technique left. These moves were similar to the moves of the Big Dipper magical fist. They weren't linked together. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have time to link these moves together. He knew that he had gotten lucky. Why didn't he hurry up and memorize all the moves? On the evening of the 9th day, Zhang Xiaohua put the heaven-piercing staff technique back on the bookshelf. He bowed to the old monk who was sweeping the floor and followed the monk out of the Sutras depository. Just as he walked to the entrance of the Dalan temple, a young monk hurriedly ran over. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua, he hurriedly bowed. Then, he looked around and whispered, Benefactor Rin, thank you for your help that day. In a while, if there are disciples of the Dalan Temple who invite you to the back of the mountain, please ignore them. Be careful of any tricks. After he finished speaking, he hurriedly left. After the young monk left, Zhang Xiaohua recalled that this young monk was the one who held onto him by the mountain spring when he and Ming came to the back of the mountain to search for the Dalan Temple. It was just a small matter, and he had long forgotten about it. The young monk's sudden gratitude and warning stunned him. Just as the young monk said, before Zhang Xiaohua had left the temple, another young monk came over. He clasped his hands together and said, "Benefactor Ren, I am Yuan Fa. I was sent by Marshal Uncle Kong Jian to deliver a letter of challenge to you." Yuan Fa? Zhang Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and asked, "Where is the letter of challenge?" "This. Marshal Uncle Kong Jian didn't write it. He only asked me to bring you to the back of the mountain." Although the young monk warned him, Zhang Xiaohua still nodded and said, "Please, lead the way." "Please." After Yuan Fa finished speaking, he walked away. When Zhang Xiaohua was about to leave, he heard Ming shout from behind, Junior Xiaoyao, where are you going?" Hearing Ming's concern, Zhang Xiaohua turned around and said, "It's all right. I need to teach that young monk a lesson. You can wait in the tent. I'll be back in a while." Ming covered her mouth and laughed. Then, "Come back early. Don't hurt that child." Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed, and a warm feeling welled up in his heart. He waved his hand as if he was bidding farewell to the housekeeper. Looking at the path Yuan Fa led, Zhang Xiaohua's face unconsciously revealed a strange expression. This was the same path that Master Changxing brought him to the Forbidden Wind Valley on the first day he came to the Dalan Temple. Although Zhang Xiaohua couldn't differentiate between north and south, he still had some impression of this path. "Don't tell me, little monk Kong Jian wants to throw me into that restrictive spell? Does he want to rely on his strength to teach me a lesson?" As expected by Zhang Xiaohua, when he saw the narrow gap in front of Yuan Fa, he laughed in his heart. The Dalan Temple really cares about their reputation. They didn't tell the other guardians about what happened in the Forbidden Wind Valley. Otherwise, why would little monk Kong Jian use this method to deal with me? Yuan Fa walked to the narrow gap and stopped. He pointed at the gap and said, "Benefactor Ren, Senior Uncle Kong Jian is already inside. I can only go this far. Please go in by yourself." "Thank you, Master." Yuan Fa's face immediately turned red. He lowered his head and said, I don't dare." Then, he ran away. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his nose, turned around, and walked into the crack. There was a restriction in this place, so he wasn't afraid that Kong Jian would play any tricks. Moreover, this was Dalan Temple's territory. No matter how bold Kong Jian was, he wouldn't dare to do anything shocking. He was probably just feeling indignant and wanted to regain some face. Sure enough, when Zhang Xiaohua came back to the platform, in front of the evil suppression cauldron, the little monk Kong Jian was still holding the 2 bronze hammers. He had a sinister smile on his face and said, "Benefactor Run is really brave. You even dared to come to the Forbidden Wind Valley. Hee, are you dumbfounded now that you're here? Can Benefactor Rin still use his internal energy?" Zhang Xiaohua's expression didn't change. He shook his head and said, "Of course not. Do I need you to tell me? I knew it 9 days ago." 9 days ago? The little monk Kong Jian was stunned. He asked in surprise, What are you doing here?" "Of course I'm here to learn from Senior Kong Ju." "What? You?" The little monk Kong Jian pointed his hammers at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "You're actually worthy enough for Senior Kong Ju to fight with you?" Zhang Xiaohua was proud of himself. Just as he was about to say something, a gust of wind suddenly blew. The entire platform was in a mess. Just as the gust of wind blew, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt his divine sense loosen. He was actually able to leave his body. The wind had actually caused the restrictive spell on the platform to lose its effectiveness. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense immediately left his body and scanned the surroundings. Suddenly, he discovered that there was a weak fluctuation of energy on the platform beside the evil suppression cauldron. It was a flaw that looked like a hole. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and flew to the little monk Kong Jian, whose face was covered by the strong wind. She reached out and sealed his acupoints. Then, she grabbed him and threw him behind a big pillar. She then flew to the side of the evil suppression cauldron on the flat platform. She cast a spell and went straight into the hole. With Zhang Xiaohua's entry, the hole was automatically sealed after a short while. The strong wind also stopped blowing. The entire platform was silent. Only Kong Jian, whose acupoints were sealed, was lying quietly under the big pillar. Zhang Xiaohua entered the platform and released her divine sense. Unconsciously, she was stunned. The entire platform was covered in restrictions. Only the space in front of her, which was about the height of a person, still had some cold wind blowing out. Only this passage-like space did not have the slightest restriction. -4. Chapter 988. Upon seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua reached out and took out the Crimson Spirit Shield. With a hand seal, the Crimson Spirit Shield flew above Zhang Xiaohua's head. A faint red light sprinkled down and covered Zhang Xiaohua. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua's figure flew out and followed the passage towards the place where the cold wind was blowing out. After about the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. His body sank and he fell into a 10-feet square space. Before he could steady himself, a strong wind blew and rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and did not dare to let the Crimson Spirit Shield take on the strong wind. He immediately flew into the air, and the strong wind swept past Zhang Xiaohua's arm, causing Zhang Xiaohua to feel a little pain. In his divine sense, the strong wind crashed into the restriction above his head and immediately rushed out of a passage that was about the height of a person. After the strong wind passed, the entire space returned to normal. Only a faint white light filled the space. It was a scene of harmony and tranquility. Although it was not lit with incense like the main hall of the Dalan Temple, there was still a faint fragrance coming from it. When Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes, he saw that in the middle of the entire space, there was a 7-jointed bamboo floating crookedly in midair. The faint white light was emitted by it, and it seemed that the fragrance was also coming from the bamboo. Zhang Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, "This bamboo. Seems like I've seen it somewhere before. Don't tell me it's similar to the bamboo behind the Guozhuang house." However, ordinary bamboo was emerald green, and when it was old, it would also wither and yellow. How could it be so sparkling and translucent, even whiter than white jade? Where have I seen it before? Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly, but immediately, he slapped his forehead and blurted out, "Changxing Abbot, wasn't there a painting hanging on the wall in Changxing Abbot's simple and crude meditation room? That painting was of a Buddha with a pale golden face, holding a bamboo that was almost identical to this one. Moreover, the bamboo in the painting was the same as the one in front of him. They both had 7 joints, and each joint had a bamboo leaf that looked like it was carved out of white jade." At this moment, a cold wind suddenly appeared below the bamboo and went straight up. With a soft swoosh, a faint layer of light formed by countless 7-colored lotuses appeared around the bamboo. The light flickered a few times, and after the cold wind passed, it gradually dimmed. The cold wind brushed past the light barrier and blew a passage through the restriction outside the space. Then, it went straight into the space. Surprised, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense. He released his divine sense. At the place where the cold wind came from, a colorless bead that was almost invisible to the naked eye and was about the size of a thumb's thumb. A wind bead? This thought immediately flashed in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Immediately after, Zhang Xiaohua's appetite was aroused and even his divine sense was burning with desire. When he used his divine sense to look around the wind bead, he was even more delighted. What do you think? He saw that there was an extremely strange fluctuation around the wind bead, which was different from what Zhang Xiaohua usually saw. It was different from a restriction, but it was different from a restriction. It could also be said that it was not a restriction. Looking at how the fluctuation was firmly suppressing the wind bead, it was extremely similar to a restriction. Normally, Zhang Xiaohua would have to think for a while, but now the fluctuation was extremely faint. Zhang Xiaohua felt that it was like a layer of window paper that could be broken with a poke. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to fly to the front of the wind bead, the bamboo suddenly emitted a faintly discernible white light, followed by a faintly discernible chanting of sutras. The white light shot towards the strange restriction around the wind bead, and the restriction shook for a while. Just as the restriction was shaking, the colorless wind bead also trembled slightly, and the restriction shook even more violently. After a while, the shaking stopped, and the strange fluctuation became even fainter. The same cold wind as before rushed out from the restriction and rushed towards the bamboo. In an instant, the chanting stopped abruptly, and the seven-colored lotus appeared. Wherever the cold wind passed, it became slightly dimmer. Ha ha ha! Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed when he saw this, and he almost did a somersault in the air. Needless to say, the bamboo was supposed to suppress the wind bead, but the wind bead was stubborn and did not perish under the suppression. Instead, it was resisting. The cold wind was not only blowing away the suppression, but it was also on the verge of destroying the bamboo's defense. Of course, looking at the state of the wind bead, it was also struggling at death's door. The wind bead and the bamboo were in a lose-lose situation. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. Zhang Xiaohua praised. The ancients really did not deceive me. Zhang Xiaohua naturally wanted to be the fisherman. He thought for a while, then took out 2 fire talismans and threw them at the bamboo. Pung! The fire talismans broke, and the 7-colored lotus was burned. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He stretched out his hand, trying to grab the bamboo through the hole. However, just as he was about to reach out his hand, a faint but abundant Buddha's light came from above the small lotus and covered it. In an instant, the small lotus was repaired. Although it was still weak, it still blocked Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He reached out his hand, trying to grab the bamboo through the hole. However, just as he was about to reach out, a faint but abundant Buddha's light came from above the small lotus and covered it. In an instant, the small lotus was repaired. Although it was still weak, it still blocked Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He thought that the defense was at the end of the line, and he could easily break it. Who knew that there would be such a change? But after thinking about it, it was normal. The evil wind was so strong that it could even break the restrictive spell, and the bamboo was able to suppress the wind bead. It must be something good. Without a few layers of protection, who would be at ease? Hence, Zhang Xiaohua threw out another fire talisman, but the result was the same. Could it be that I have to use other methods? Zhang Xiaohua pinched his chin and thought for a while. With a shake of his hand, he took out Chasing Dream. Who knew that although Chasing Dream's 8 sword radiances were extremely nimble, the Buddha's light seemed to be everywhere. The moment Chasing Dream's sword radiances left, the Buddha's light immediately repaired the lotus. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Although the restrictive spell was very weak, but it could not withstand the constant repair. If it continued to repair, wouldn't it be impossible to break it? Unknowingly, Zhang Xiaohua used her soul awareness to look at the source of the Buddha's light, and had the idea of taking drastic measures. Indeed, in that direction, the restrictive spell in the entire space had some strange changes. And at this moment, coincidentally, a gust of evil wind blew past and blew the lotus out again. The evil wind was stronger this time, and a ray of Buddha's light appeared again, passing through the strange restrictive spell. Right at this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, and as if telepathic, she immediately conjured a spell and flew towards the restrictive spell. Strangely, the Buddha's light was faint, and Zhang Xiaohua flew in without any obstruction. Instead, she felt like a fish in water. At this moment, the restrictive spell seemed to have become transparent, and Zhang Xiaohua passed through it without any obstruction. Strange? Zhang Xiaohua praised in her heart, I have only practiced the fire escape technique and the earth escape technique, and I have not practiced the light escape technique. All I have now is the flying technique, but why does it feel so strange inside this Buddha's light? And why do I know in my heart that this restrictive spell can be broken? However, the flying speed was fast, and before she could understand it carefully, she was already in an unknown space. When Zhang Xiaohua came to this space, he did not need to use his soul awareness. Just by looking at it with the naked eye, it was enough to make him stunned on the spot. He saw that there were only 2 colors in this space, one black and one white. The black was on top, and the white was on the bottom. The place where the black and white met in the middle was very clear, and there was no sign of gray at all. When he took a closer look, the black one had the absolute advantage again. It was like a black cloud covering the top, completely suppressing the white one below. It was actually black, and it was suppressing the white color. And in the white color, there was a ninth-grade lotus, emitting a faint white Buddha's light. Looking up, it was also pitch black. However, a black flag could be seen in the pitch-black darkness, and it suddenly came into view. This, Zhang Xiaohua once again let out an extremely astonished sigh. He rubbed his eyes hard. He really could not understand how he could still see darkness in the darkness. Furthermore, the black flag was still swaying slightly in the windless space. It was quite proud. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the black and white color and unconsciously thought of the black and white fruit that he had kept in his money bag. However, that black and white fruit was similar to the elixir produced by the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace, and it looked like a yin and yang fish. There was white in the black and black in the white. The black and white in front of him were somewhat different, and it was a pure opposition of black and white. After looking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense, but just as he released it, his jaw almost dropped. Not to mention that the light emitted by the 9th-grade lotus was not pure white in his divine sense, but was divided into 9 colors, and the 9 colors were not only suppressed by the black color, but also divided into thin filaments in the gaps of the black color, like the roots of a big tree that was upside down, extending upwards. And the gaps of the Buddha's light made Zhang Xiaohua even more dumbfounded. The surroundings of the black flag were actually filled with knives, spears, swords, halberds, hammers, sickles, bottles. In short, there were all kinds of shapes, and there was no exception. Zhang Xiaohua carefully scanned with his divine sense, and it turned out that there were 360 Dharma instruments that were emitting strange, primitive, and bloodthirsty fluctuations. And the 9-colored Buddha's light was seeping out from the gaps of these 360 Dharma instruments. But when he saw this, Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously frowned, and even became a little pensive. The positions of these 360 Dharma instruments looked very familiar, and it should be a very powerful array, and the Buddha's light could actually seep out from this array. Either the Buddha's light was valiant and broke out of the array, or there was another situation, and this Buddha's light was purposely released by this array. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua released a strand of his divine sense. The Buddha's light from the 9th-grade lotus did not block it, but the black array moved slightly and blocked the strand of divine sense. -4. Chapter 989. The black array didn't move, but when it moved, Zhang Xiaohua saw the clues. He laughed wildly in his heart. No wonder it felt so familiar. Isn't this the rabbit amulet from the Naiwan Palace? It's just that. This magic item replaced the individual amulets, and the position of this magic item has a huge flaw. It's basically placed in the wrong place. While thinking, Zhang Xiaohua leaped and flew to the front of one of the magic items that looked like a flying hook. He looked at it for a moment and took out a jade amulet from his pocket. It was one of the rabbit amulets that he usually made. He held the amulet in his hand and carefully placed it about 3 inches away from the flying hook. Then, he pointed his finger at it, and a wisp of vital energy entered it. With a swoosh sound, the amulet flashed with a golden light and a mysterious wave was emitted. Once the wave was emitted, it seemed to have a strong suction force. It merged with the wave that was emitted from the black array. In just a moment, the golden amulet became a part of the array. Since the golden talisman had become one of the rabbit talismans, then, the flying hook-like Dharma artifact had broken free from the shackles of the original Dharma array. The waves it emitted were no longer accepted by the Dharma array. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua extended his hand and easily picked up the Dharma artifact. And where the Dharma artifact was located, a huge flaw suddenly appeared. Picking up the flying hook, Zhang Xiaohua used his divine sense to examine it carefully. It seemed that the surface of the flying hook had a restriction that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know about. Then, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something. He reached out his right hand and took out the black jade amulet that he got from the mysterious cave. Indeed, The waves from the two items were very similar. This kind of vital energy seems to be different from the vital energy of heaven and earth. It should be another kind of vital energy. Zhang Xiaohua had used his illusion breaker eyes to see the different types of vital energy in heaven and earth. He knew that this method, or this magic item, was not used by the immortal Tao. Let's keep it. Maybe it will be useful in the future? Zhang Xiaohua thought, and put the two items back into the money bag. Then, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the black flag that was fluttering despite the lack of wind and began to think. Since the spirit design had been broken, the 9th grade lotus platform and the black flag were all exposed. How could he not take them? Thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua released a wisp of divine sense towards the flag. Unexpectedly, as soon as his divine sense came into contact with the pitch-black surface of the flag, the surface of the flag rolled up and swallowed Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense. Moreover, a mysterious wave of energy followed the direction of his divine sense and rushed towards him. Looking at it was like a wolf that hadn't caught its prey in a long time. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Wasn't this situation similar to the mysterious cave? He didn't even think about it. He immediately used the method of using the incense cult's divine sense that he had obtained from Abbess Jinggang's jade slip and cut off the divine sense. He didn't dare to let that wave of energy enter his Naiwan palace. A pain that was imprinted in the depths of his mind came from the place where his divine sense was broken. It was just like a broken limb, but this pain was 1,000 times more intense. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's face turned pale and his forehead was covered in sweat. With a hoot sound, Zhang Xiaohua's body flew up. He endured the pain and flew to a high place in the space. Then, he made a hand seal. The high place in the space was now only a thick layer of soil. There were no restrictions. He used the earth escape technique and rushed out of the space. Once he got out of the ground, Zhang Xiaohua looked around casually. He then sat down cross-legged and silently used the God guidance to slowly recover his divine sense and heal his injuries. After about the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the pain of his divine sense being broken slowly subsided. Alas, I went for wool but came home shorn. In the future, it's better not to touch these black things. Zhang Xiaohua was quite regretful. He stood up from the ground and carefully observed his location. It was a huge place, and the ground Zhang Xiaohua was standing on was covered with all sorts of strange images. There were pagodas, Buddhas, and pagodas. Surrounding the pagodas, Buddhas, and temple halls were people of all sorts, all of whom were bowing their heads in worship. Above the crowd was a flying celestial maiden and a sky full of flowers. Next to the celestial maiden was a flying celestial dragon, a hovering eagle, and a 9-colored deer standing on auspicious clouds. Zhang Xiaohua roughly looked at the ground. The ground under his feet was about 1,000 feet. When he looked up again, it was like a pavilion. It shrunk layer by layer. The top was so small that it was almost invisible. He didn't know that it was too high. On the side of the pavilion, like the ground, there were also all kinds of pictures, all kinds of human figures, and all kinds of stories. It looked unusually beautiful and shocking. On the side of the pavilion, in addition to the pictures, the most conspicuous thing was that there were many lifelike Buddhas. These Buddhas were the size of a real person. They were either standing, lying down, or sitting cross-legged. However, there was one thing in common. In front of each pagoda, there was a protrusion. On the protrusion, there was a wooden box with sandalwood incense. There was no restriction on the wooden box. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense penetrated it. Inside, there was nothing except silk and some scriptures. Strange. Why are there so many boxes with silk and scriptures? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. He released his divine sense and looked at all the sandalwood boxes in his divine sense. Inside, there were only silk and scriptures. Many of them didn't even have scriptures, only a few strands of silk. Zhang Xiaohua made a gesture and wanted to fly up to take a closer look. Only then did she realize that she couldn't use the flying technique in this pavilion. Moreover, there was no ladder in this pavilion with the naked eye. Releasing his divine sense, Zhang Xiaohua saw that whether it was the pictures on the ground or the pictures on the wall, there was a faint flash of Buddha's light. He still didn't find any way to go up. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to use the ethereal steps to search for the corner of the pavilion. The edge of the pavilion seemed to be only a few hundred feet long, but Zhang Xiaohua actually took half the time it took to brew a cup of tea to reach it. By the time he finished looking at the 6 wall-like edges, he spent about the time it took to eat a meal. Zhang Xiaohua found a small door that was about the height of a person at one of the edges. However, this door was also sealed. Zhang Xiaohua gave up after a cursory look. This seal was related to the Buddha's light, and it was not something he could see through with his cultivation. Inside this small door, Zhang Xiaohua found dozens of sandalwood boxes similar to the ones on the wall. In these sandalwood boxes, they were different from the ones on the wall. In addition to scriptures and silk, there were some round, square, pale white, and red beads. Some of these beads were the size of a finger, some were the size of a soybean, and the largest one was the size of an egg. What is this? Using his divine sense, he saw that these were different from the immortal Tao artifacts and jade slips. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. Then, he formed an incantation gesture and waved his hand. All the sandalwood boxes opened, and the beads inside were swept clean. He put them all into his belt. Seeing that there was nothing else in the pavilion, Zhang Xiaohua returned to the black and white space. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to touch the pitch-black flag. However, the lotus throne didn't seem to reject him. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua tried to put his divine sense on the lotus throne again. At this time, the lotus throne suddenly shook. A ray of Buddha's light penetrated diagonally downwards. The little colorful lotus below was probably attacked by the wind beads again. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. She flew toward the restriction that the Buddha's light penetrated. At the same time, she used her divine sense to try and put the lotus throne into her belt. Unexpectedly, it went smoothly. The lotus throne seemed to have been waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to save it. When her divine sense moved, the Buddha's light immediately shone brightly. Then, it shrank countless times and flew into Zhang Xiaohua's belt. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't sure if she had put the lotus throne away, or if the lotus throne had walked right into the trap. Within the Buddha's light, the pitch-black flag fluttered rapidly. A wave of fluctuation was coming out from the array. Zhang Xiaohua flew and pointed at the golden talisman. The talisman rotated slightly and activated the fluctuation of the array, intercepting the flag. Then, Zhang Xiaohua slapped her, and followed the Buddha's light into the restriction where the bamboo and wind bead were. Hee. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the small lotus beside the bamboo and laughed. The big lotus is already surnamed Zhang. How much more arrogant can you be? As she spoke, she threw out another fire talisman. This time, it easily burned a big hole in the small lotus. Then, he stretched out his hand and reached into the restriction. Oh, why is it so heavy? Zhang Xiaohua grabbed it, but couldn't lift it. So, she wrapped her divine sense around it and exerted force with her left arm. The bamboo was immediately taken out by Zhang Xiaohua and put it into the money bag. It was also very smooth.
Strange.
Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled. She couldn't help but think to herself, the bamboo and the lotus throne, did I take them? Or did they run to me on their own? Luckily, I separated them so that they wouldn't meet each other. Hee. The bamboo disappeared, and so did the restriction that suppressed the wind bead. The wind bead was immediately exposed in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and reached out to grab it. But just as her hand touched the wind bead, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Before she could retract her hand, a cold aura shot out from the wind bead. That aura was like a sharp needle, piercing through Zhang Xiaohua's index finger. A drop of golden blood dripped onto the wind bead. The wind bead trembled slightly, and the drop of blood seemed to have seeped into the wind bead and disappeared. As for the aura that pierced through Zhang Xiaohua's finger, once it left the wind bead, it immediately turned into a cold wind and rushed towards the place where Zhang Xiaohua came from. That's great. This is a heaven-sent opportunity. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed when she saw the cold wind blowing a passageway above her head. She reached out her left hand and grabbed the wind pearl that seemed to have stopped moving. Then, she flew into the newly formed passageway. -4. Chapter 990. Woo. A gust of wind blew on the platform again. In the gust of wind, Zhang Xiaohua's slender figure appeared from the mountain rock beside the evil suppression cauldron. Before he landed on the ground, a green jade box appeared in his hand. He quickly put the wind bead into the jade box and cast a dozen of his most powerful inhibition spells on the jade box. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua heave a sigh of relief. He attached a strand of divine thought to the jade box and put it into his belt. This wind bead was extremely powerful. Since it was able to fight against the bamboo that was suppressing him, he was not sure if the jade box would be able to trap it. Thus, he left a strand of his divine sense. As long as the wind bead showed any changes, Zhang Xiaohua would immediately unleash the powerful seal again. After doing all this, Zhang Xiaohua took the little monk Kong Jian out from behind the stone pillar. She put him down and unsealed his acupoints to wake him up. At this time, the gust of wind had just passed. Kong Jian did not suspect anything. He rubbed his eyes and said, "Why is the wind so strange? I've only heard wind in the Forbidden Wind Valley occasionally. Why is there so much cold wind these days?" Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She asked, "Why is this place called the Forbidden Wind Valley?" This, Kong Jian was stunned. He said, "How would I know? I've asked my senior brothers before, but they all said they didn't know. Even Abbot Changxing doesn't know. He only knows that it has always been called that." Then, Kong Jian looked at Zhang Xiaohua and asked tentatively, "Almsgiverin, you said you had a fight with Senior Kong Ju. You too. Who won?" "Do you still need to ask?" Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose. "If your Senior Kong Ju won, wouldn't you know? If I lost, would I be able to stay in the sutra depository for the next few days?" The little monk, Kong Jian, was on the verge of breaking down. With a long face, he clasped his hands together and said, "Almsgiverin, I asked you to come here because I wanted to have a chat with you about our ideals. The weather is so beautiful today, we can't afford to be irritable." But the wind was strong just now, so this little monk suddenly remembered that the clothes I washed in the morning are still hanging by the door. If I don't take them in, they will get dirty. So, let's not talk about life today. We'll talk about it when we have the chance in the future." Zhang Xiaohua was almost laughing in his heart. Yes. Little monk Kong Jian was overjoyed and said, "In the future, when I walk a little further on the path of life and comprehend more, I'll talk to Almsgiverin. What do you think?" "Of course." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. "I'm also dizzy from all the reading in the sutra depository. How would I have the mood to talk about my thoughts?" "All right, then I'll accompany you back." Little monk Kong Jian heaved a huge sigh of relief. Without hesitation, he led Zhang Xiaohua back to the entrance of the Dalan temple. Seeing that the little monk had left in a hurry, Ming giggled and said, "How was it? Did you teach this little monk a good lesson today?" "Of course," Zhang Xiaohua said proudly. "I, Xiaoxia, am the best at persuading people with my virtue." When this little monk Kong Jian listened to my advice, he almost thought that I, Xiaoxia, had a glib tongue. Before I finished speaking, he was already convinced. If he wasn't a monk, he would have chopped off a chicken's head and burned yellow paper to become sworn brothers with me. Ha ha ha. Meng laughed hysterically. She pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, You'd better be a monk. It's a great loss for Buddhism to lose you." "That won't do," Zhang Xiaohua said in all seriousness. "It's only because you exist in this world that I jumped out of Buddhism. From then on, I have no fate with Buddhism. If I were to convert to Buddhism now, wouldn't the 500 years of looking back and praying in front of Buddha be for nothing? It doesn't matter if our fate is in vain, but if Buddha's promise is in vain, my sin will be great." Xiaohua. Meng was very touched when she heard this. She stepped forward and held his hand. She looked at him affectionately. Although it was close to dusk, the two of them could still see each other through their sparkling eyes. Meng was held in Zhang Xiaohua's arms. Her hot body temperature made Zhang Xiaohua restless. After a long while, Meng pushed Zhang Xiaohua away and whispered, "Xiaohua, this is the pure land of Buddhism. Don't, hee." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Then, is it okay if we're not in the pure land of Buddhism?" Meng rolled her eyes at him. She looked at the Dalan temple like a creeping monster and asked in a low voice, "Today is the 9th day. What secret book did you read in the Sutras depository? Haven't you finished reading it? Is it possible that the secret book of the Dalan temple is really unique?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "It's a strange stick technique. I won't tell you the details, but—" Zhang Xiaohua hesitated and said, "I thought I could finish it in 2 or 3 days. Who would have thought that I would finish it today? Even if I'm not in a hurry, I'm afraid the monks of the Dalan temple will be anxious. Alas, I have to hurry up tomorrow." "That's okay." Meng comforted her and said, "Anyway, we've already sent the invitation to the sect leader. There's still some time before the martial arts convention. Even if we can't go back in time, we won't delay the sect leader's matters. You can read it carefully and patiently here. At worst, we'll go back to Lingxiang Peak with Master Changsheng. He. Besides, the Dalan temple has already agreed to let you read it. They can't possibly chase you away after you finish reading it, right?" "Not necessarily," Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Sure enough, on the 10th day, when Zhang Xiaohua immersed her divine sense into the secret book of the heavenly staff technique and no one else appeared, the great Master Changgung appeared. The great Master Changgung smiled and said, "Young benefactor Run, I heard from the disciples of the Sutras depository that you're diligent and eager to learn. Just this ordinary heavenly staff technique alone took you 9 days. This really makes the disciples of the Dalan temple blush with shame." As he spoke, he glanced at the secret book in Zhang Xiaohua's hands. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and looked at the secret book that had flipped to the last page. She closed it and handed it to the great Master Changgung. She said, "This disciple is stupid and can't remember this staff technique. You didn't allow me to copy it, so I had to revise it every day. If there's anything wrong, I'll have to ask for your mercy." "It's okay. It's okay." The great Master Changgung waved his hands and said, "All the martial arts in the world originate from the Great Forest. The secret books of the Dalan temple are naturally for everyone to learn. Young benefactor Ren, just try your best to learn." However, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Does the great master have something to say? This old monk has some matters to attend to and needs to leave the temple. I remember that young benefactor has something to ask this old monk. Io. Zhang Xiaohua slapped her forehead. She had wanted to ask the great Master Changgung about Ming's background, but she had forgotten about the staff technique. It was rare that Ming knew about her cultivation and never mentioned it for the past 9 days. If the great Master Changgung hadn't come, she probably would have forgotten about it. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly got up and put the secret book of the heavenly staff technique back to its original place. She pulled the great Master Changgung and said, "Great Master is merciful. This junior has almost forgotten about it. This junior has already memorized the staff technique, and there's no need for me to come to the Sutras depository. Great Master, please quickly tell this junior and senior Sister Zixia about the past." Haha, benefactor need not be in such a hurry. This old monk has obtained the abbot's permission. Naturally, this old monk will explain everything. However, this involves the secrets of the Dalan temple. Therefore, I cannot say too much. The great Master Changgung said as he followed Zhang Xiaohua out of the Sutras depository. After the two of them left, the old monk frowned and floated up. It was the imperial wind technique. He floated to the front of the bookshelf where the heavenly staff technique was kept. He raised his hand and took out the manual. However, when he immersed his divine sense into it, he looked at it for a long time before withdrawing. His face was filled with confusion as he whispered, "It's a very simple staff technique. How could this young benefactor be interested in it for 9 days? Could it be that his aptitude is so poor? But with such poor aptitude, how could he enter the Tao of immortality? How strange, how strange." He then smiled bitterly and clasped his hands together. Amitabha, the Tao of immortality has long been destroyed. For the incense sect to have such a disciple is already not bad. Even if there is something strange about it, what can be done? After he finished speaking, he floated down and continued to sweep the floor. Zhang Xiaohua followed the great Master Changgung out of the Dalan temple. Meng was surprised that Zhang Xiaohua had come out so early today. After bowing to the great Master Changgung, The great master Changgung took out a piece of paper and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. He said apologetically, Benefactor Run, regarding Benefactor Zixia's matter, this old monk is in a difficult position. Although the abbot has said that there is nothing about the Dalan temple that cannot be told to others, but there are still some secrets. Forgive this old monk for not being able to. Haha, here are some places and names. The two of you will have to search for them yourselves. I see. Zhang Xiaohua was a little disappointed, but Ming's eyes flashed with gratitude. She bowed again and said, Thank you for your kindness, great master. This matter involves the privacy of your esteemed temple and should not be divulged. Great master, please rest assured that this matter will only be known by me and Junior brother. As long as it involves the Dalan temple, we will definitely hear it and rot in our hearts. Haha, that's good, that's good. At this moment, the great master Changgung released the paper in his hand. Zhang Xiaohua took the paper and opened it. There were indeed several places and names inside. She turned to look at Ming and handed the paper over. Ming shook her head and said, Junior brother, you should take it. We are in the same profession. Oh, okay then. Zhang Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and kept it in her arms. The great master Changgung nodded slightly and said with a smile, I have seen young Benefactor Ren's staff techniques. The abbot has decreed that if Benefactor wishes to pay respects to great master Yuantian, please follow me. After hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua understood. She had talked to great master Changxing and the great master Changgung about paying respects to great master Changgung. Great master Changxing had replied that they could go to the pagoda forest to pay their respects before they left. Now that he mentioned it, he probably had the intention of sending them off. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and said, That's right. The great master Changgung has spoken my mind. I have been nagging your esteemed temple for several days. After paying respects to great master Yuantian, we should return to the incense cult. Please cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a collection, and a tip. Thank you. -4. Chapter 991. Haha, I don't mean to drive you away. Great Master Changgung said with a smile, I feel that there is still some time before the martial arts conference. Yixia Town is only a few days away from the Dalan Temple. You might as well go and take a look. Maybe you can find something. Yixia Town? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and immediately understood. Yixia Town, Hou Mingcheng. Wasn't he the one at the top of the list that Great Master Changgung had just taught her? Zhang Xiaohua felt ashamed and bowed. I was rude and measured the heart of a gentleman with my own mean measure. Please forgive me. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was so honest, Great Master Changgung was also relieved. He reached out to help her up and said, It's okay. It's okay. You are guests from afar and sincerely worship the previous generation of the temple. How can I care? Zhang Xiaohua blushed again. She was just worshipping on behalf of Nanjing Yi. How could it be like what Great Master Changgung said? Because of this, her impression of Great Master Changgung was different from before. She said, Please lead the way. By the way, Great Master, is the Forest of Pagodas very famous? Ha ha ha. Great Master Changgung waved his hand and said, Please follow me. Great Master Changgung took Zhang Xiaohua and Dream, followed by several Dalan Temple monks. They went up the mountain path on the left side of the Dalan Temple and went to the back of the mountain. On the way, Great Master Changgung said, The Forest of Pagodas of the Dalan Temple is a famous place in Jianghu. After hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua sweated profusely. She was ashamed of her ignorance. However, the cult of fragrance has always been closed. Young Benefactor Ren probably doesn't know about it because you rarely walk around in Jianghu. It's understandable. Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and did not answer. This forest of pagodas is the tomb of the great masters of the Dalan Temple. Since the founding of the Dalan Temple, only the famous and accomplished great masters have to build pagodas in the forest of pagodas after they pass away to show their merit. The height, size, and number of floors of the pagoda are determined by the master's attainments in Buddhism, prestige, and merit. Alas, the martial arts that Jianghu values have become insignificant. Oh, I understand. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Master's ashes or bones should be placed under this pagoda. No, no. The great Master Changgung shook his head. If that's the case, wouldn't it be no different from an ordinary grave? This pagoda is only used to commemorate the eminent monks of Buddhism. Their bones, no, relics and other things are placed in the Guiyuan Pagoda for preservation. Saraira? Guiyuan Pagoda? Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. What is a Saraira? Where is this Guiyuan Pagoda? With the forest of pagodas, wouldn't it be convenient to place the bones in the pagoda? Why is it placed in the Guiyuan Pagoda? Haha, little benefactor. You don't know. The Saraira is the remains of the eminent monks of Buddhism after they pass away. This set of bones is different from the bones of ordinary people. Its shape is ever-changing. Some are round, some are oval, some are lotus, some are even Buddha and Bodhisattva. Even the colors are different. There are black, white, red, green, and other colors. It looks very respectable, like pearls, agates, and crystals. This is related to the cultivation of the eminent monks. Alas, although my martial arts are strong, if I can refine it into a Saraira after I pass away, it can be considered that I have achieved success in my cultivation in this life. Isn't this similar to the spiritual beasts in Huansu? There's something in the body? Zhang Xiaohua was slightly stunned. In her heart, she naturally compared the Saraira with some of the beast pills in her belt. But immediately, Zhang Xiaohua thought of the hundreds of round beads that were similar to the Saraira mentioned by the great Master Changgung in that strange pavilion. Could those be Saraira? Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. But how would she dare to take out the round beads? After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua probed. With the great master's martial arts cultivation, after he passes away, there will definitely be Saraira. The great master Changgung was also puzzled. He turned to look at Zhang Xiaohua and asked, Little benefactor Run, how can you be so sure? Haha, the great master is the law enforcement elder of the Dalan Temple. If the great master doesn't have a Saraira after he passes away, how many disciples in this generation of the temple can there be? Zhang Xiaohua explained and then apologized. I hope the great master can forgive me for rudely discussing the great master's matters after his death. It's all right, it's all right. The great master Changgung waved his hand and said, Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, life is death, death is life. If I can't even understand this, how can I talk about Saraira? Then, he smiled and said, Little benefactor Ren's words may be arbitrary, but there's some truth in them. Although the attainment of Dharma has always been the key point of Saraira, but if the martial arts cultivation is not high, this Saraira, cough, maybe there is, but it's limited. Of course, the Dalan Temple places equal emphasis on Dharma and martial arts, and even views martial arts as a minor detail. If the disciples of the Dalan Temple want to reach the peak of martial arts, they must also be proficient in Dharma. Otherwise, it's extremely easy for them to go mad and die a horrible death. There's such a saying? Zhang Xiaohua was flabbergasted and said, Then according to what the great master said just now, there aren't too many monks who have profound attainment in Dharma, but not high martial arts. Little benefactor Ran is right. The great master Changgung nodded and said, The eminent monks of the Dalan Temple have always been like this. As long as the attainment in Dharma is high, it's easy for them to achieve great success in martial arts. Only a few great masters are obsessed with Dharma and don't want to practice martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little lucky at this time. It seems that those beads are not Saraira. Oh, by the way, great master, the Dalan Temple has stood in Jianghu for so many years. How many pagodas are there in the pagoda forest? Zhang Xiaohua asked again. Not many. Only 99,803 pagodas. Although the great master Changgung said it was not many, his eyes were full of pride. So many? Zhang Xiaohua and Meng were shocked. Then, how big is this pagoda forest? Little benefactor Run, please look. The great master Changgung pointed to the undulating mountain range in front of them and said, This mountain range is full of pagodas. This pagoda forest is the entire mountain range. Zhang Xiaohua and Ming looked up and saw that not far away, on the mountain range, there were countless pagodas. Some had 4 corners, some had 5 corners, some had 7, Some had 9 corners, some were in the shape of pillars, some were in the shape of vertical triangles, some were in the shape of bottles, some were in the shape of gourds, some were in the shape of trumpets, and some were in the shape of water droplets. Some had 2 or 3 floors, while others had 7 or 8 floors. The tallest ones had more than 10 floors. In short, there were many kinds of pagodas with strange shapes. Although it was far away, the pagodas were carved with countless patterns. Some were flying, some were birds and beasts, some were Buddhas, and some were nirvana. The patterns were vivid and lifelike. Although it was far away, they could feel the painstaking effort contained in them. It looked very similar to the patterns in the pavilion that Zhang Xiaohua had entered. Great Master, is that the Guiyuan Tower? Zhang Xiaohua pointed to a tall pagoda built against the mountain and asked without hesitation, Little Benefactor Ran is right. That is the Guiyuan Tower of the Dalan Temple. The great master Changgung looked at the huge pagoda with reverence in his eyes. He said solemnly, The Guiyuan Tower is built against the mountain. Its height is as high as the mountain range. At the top of the mountain, you can see that the top of the Guiyuan Tower is taller than the tallest pagoda in the pagoda forest. The Guiyuan Tower occupies a large area. Only the entrance of the tower is exposed in the pagoda forest. Most of the Guiyuan Tower is blocked by the forest, so you can't see the whole picture. TSK. That's right. Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed in admiration. The relics of more than 90,000 eminent monks are all placed in the Guiyuan Tower. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua knew that the place she was at was definitely not the Guiyuan Tower, and the round bead she had obtained was definitely not a relic. Haha, little benefactor Rin is not completely right. The great master Changgung corrected her. There are eminent monks in the Dalan Temple who are qualified to build pagodas. Their relics must be placed in the Guiyuan Tower. In addition, even if they are not qualified to build pagodas, as long as they cultivate relics, they can place them in the Guiyuan Tower for worship. Ah? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Then, the relics in the Guiyuan Tower. No, the relics of the deceased great masters. Aren't they? Ba, little benefactor Run is right. The great master Changgung put his palms together and said, There are countless eminent monks enshrined in the Guiyuan Tower. Naturally, Zhang Xiaohua, who knew that the round bead she had obtained was not a relic, connected the relic in the Guiyuan Tower with the monster core she had obtained. She instantly thought that if she could explore the Guiyuan Tower, then wouldn't the rewards be great? However, Zhang Xiaohua immediately rejected the idea. The relic of an accomplished monk was still the corpse of a master. Ignoring the fact that the master was a person of virtue and prestige when he was alive, even an ordinary monk was still a corpse. It was not appropriate to offend him. Looking at the huge Guiyuan Tower, Zhang Xiaohua was full of regret and sighed. There are so many relics in such a tall pagoda. It's not easy to place the relics even once. The great master Changgung's face was full of admiration. He shook his head and said, Little benefactor Run is wrong this time. Why? Not only Zhang Xiaohua, but even Meng was curious. The Guiyuan Tower was built by the immortal masters of the Dalan Temple. Inside the tower is the most powerful formation in the world. No one can enter. Only the relics of eminent monks need to be enshrined. As long as the abbot of each generation holds a treasure passed down in the Dalan Temple, they can enter the tower. As long as the relics are placed in a place in the tower, the relics will be automatically protected by the formation in the Guiyuan Tower. There's no need for anyone to place them. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. There's such a wonderful thing? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's surprise, the great master Changgung was very happy and said, Your temple has the sect-protecting formation and the peak-protecting formation. It's not surprising that the Dalan Temple has this kind of pagoda-protecting formation. Even an enlightened monk has the desire to win? Zhang Xiaohua curled his lips in his heart as he chuckled and did not continue the conversation. -4. Chapter 992. Under the guidance of Great Master Changgung, everyone came to a Buddhist pagoda that was several feet tall and had a single story with many eaves. At this time, there was an incense burner and some candles placed in front of the pagoda. Zhang Xiaohua followed Great Master Changgung, bowed, and lit the candles. It could be considered as paying respects to Great Master Yuan Tian on behalf of Abbess Jing Yi. Little benefactor, if you have any wishes, you can also pray here. Perhaps Great Master Yuan Tian can hear your wishes in the Western Paradise. Oh? Zhang Xiaohua raised her eyebrows and looked at Ming beside her. She put her palms together and prayed silently in her heart for a moment before getting up. After paying respects to Great Master Yuan Tian, Zhang Xiaohua looked up at the huge Guiyuan pagoda in the distance. She wanted to go and take a look, but Great Master Changgung turned a deaf ear to Zhang Xiaohua's actions. He smiled and said, "Little benefactor, the sect's official business is done. If you have time, you can stay in my temple for a few days and listen to Buddhist teachings." "No, Great Master. The official business is done, but there are still some trivial matters. Thank you for your convenience. I will never forget it." Disciple also thanks Great Master for your grace. Meng also expressed her gratitude. It's fine. Great Master Changgung waved his hand and said to Meng, "Our temple's rules have been passed down since ancient times." Benefactor Zixia didn't even take a step into the temple and stayed outside. "I hope Benefactor won't blame me." I wouldn't dare, Ming quickly replied. "I still have some matters to attend to at the Guiyuan Pagoda, so I won't see you off." As he spoke, Master Changgung took out a few jade bottles from his bosom and said, "These are the Dahuan pills and Xiaohuan pills secretly concocted by my Dalan temple. They have miraculous effects for healing injuries. I promised them to you earlier, so please accept them." "Haha," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. "Great Master is indeed a trustworthy person. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony." "Haha, why stand on ceremony? This old monk knows that your fragrant religion also has healing panaceas. The effect may not be worse than these." Zhang Xiaohua slapped his forehead and said, "Grandmaster said so. This little one is lacking in manners." Senior Sister Zixia. Meng suddenly understood. She took out a bottle of Yuandan pill from her bosom and handed it to the Great Master Changgung. She said, "This is the Yuandan pill used in our cult. Disciple has come out this time. Jiaozhu's gift is limited. Grandmaster, please kindly accept it." Great Master Changgung politely accepted it and said, "Your cult's Yuandan pill and my temple's Dahuan pill are both healing panaceas. Although they are not the same, they have the same effect. If you take both together, you will get twice the result with half the effort." Then, he took out a thin booklet and said, "When this old monk was young, he wandered the Jianghu and found a book called Poison Scripture. It contains vicious methods and powerful poisons, which are contrary to our temple's benevolence. This old monk has always wanted to destroy it, but the contents are very classic. Moreover, if used properly, they can save lives. Therefore, I have never found a better way. Now that I see that young benefactor is benevolent, I would like to gift this poison scripture to you. I hope that benefactor will be benevolent and not use poison without permission." Then, he handed the poison scripture to Meng and added, "Benefactor, please swear that this poison scripture will never be used on the disciples of the Dalan Temple." Meng frowned slightly and wanted to decline. Zhang Xiaohua glared at her and secretly said, "This is something that has been delivered to your door. Why decline? Just take it as an exchange for the Yuandan pill." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's meaningful glance, Meng accepted the poison scripture and swore. "Very good." Great Master Changgung put his palms together and said, "This old monk will not send you off. We will meet again at the Martial Arts Assembly on Lingxiang Peak." Zhang Xiaohua and Meng also bowed and bid farewell. Accompanied by a few monks behind them, they returned to the Dalan Temple. At this time, Monk Kongshan was already waiting for them. He smiled and said, "The abbot has ordered this poor monk to send you off." Very good, very good." Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands, tidied up, and led the 4 odd beasts. Meng also led the big white horse and followed Monk Kongshan out of the Dalan Temple. When they reached the front of the mountain, Kongshan smiled and said, "Even if you accompany me for 1,000 miles, we will still have to part. Benefactor Ren, this poor monk is very gratified to have met an opponent like you. This poor monk still needs to cultivate. I hope to spar with you again at the Martial Arts Assembly." "Don't." Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, The martial arts assembly is a matter for the leader of Lingxiang Peak. I am only a guardian disciple. Even if something happens, Senior Mo Shuigong will stand up for me. It has nothing to do with me. Hehe, of course, if Senior Kongchan is itchy, we can still spar in private. Ha ha ha, Benefactor Run is straightforward. It's settled then. The two of them high-fived and bid farewell. My goodness, what is recorded in this poison sutra? The rising sun gave off warmth. On a wide official road, Zhang Xiaohua rode on the four odd beasts and held the thin book in her hand. Ming, on the other hand, was riding a white horse. She smiled and looked at Zhang Xiaohua quietly. Really, Ming, don't you want to take a look? How to use poisonous insects, how to pick poisonous plants. There are even drugs that can make people fake death. TSK, if I didn't look, I wouldn't have thought that there are so many ways to make people beg for death. There are even poisons that can control people's minds? Why? Zhang Xiaohua flipped through the book and suddenly felt that this thing was similar to what she had obtained from a jade slip from Abbess Jinggang. Ming shook her head and said, Monk Changgung is a little strange. I can't tell what he is thinking. Since he trusted me and gave me the poison sutra, why did he make me swear? If I poison a monk of the Dalan Temple, what can the oath do? Moreover, if I poison him, do I have to ask if he is a monk of the Dalan Temple? He didn't say that this poison sutra can't be given to others. If I give you the poison sutra and don't read it, even if I poison a monk of the Dalan Temple, I won't violate the oath. Don't tease me. Hehe. No wonder you specifically said in the oath that you have to use the poison sutra to poison a monk of the Dalan Temple to fulfill the oath. It turns out that you have this kind of intention. I admire you. I admire you. You admire my ass. Ming rebuked and jumped on the back of the four odd beasts. She pinched Zhang Xiaohua's ear and said, Anyway, I am by your side. If anyone poisons me, you will protect me. If I want to kill a monk of the Dalan Temple, you can use the methods in the Poison Sutra. I didn't do anything and you didn't swear, so you didn't break the oath. My wife is wise. Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly. Before he could lower his head, Zhang Xiaohua cried out, Io, can you be gentler? Ming tightened her grip and said with a red face, Who is your wife? When did I agree to it? My God, you are holding my hand. Who do you want to marry? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly turned his head and broke free from Ming's small hand. He said, Is there anyone in this world who is more handsome than me? Ming's face turned red and she covered her mouth. She almost fell off the four odd beasts. Zhang Xiaohua quickly grabbed Ming's waist and placed her in front of him. He wrapped his arms around Ming's waist and his face was filled with happiness. Ming closed her eyes and enjoyed this moment of tenderness. Ming didn't break free until she heard the faint sound of horse hooves in the distance. She said in a low voice, Xiaohua, I think we should go back. I always feel uneasy. This Isha town. It's okay if we don't go. As long as you are with me, even if I can't find my family and don't know my background. What's the big deal? Looking at Ming's sad and determined eyes, Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached. He held Ming's small hand and said, Everyone has a family. A fallen leaf must return to its root. If you don't know your background, you won't be at peace for the rest of your life. Besides, if you want to be my wife, don't you want to marry me officially? If you still have family in this world, don't you want to let them know and make them happy? Who said I want to marry you? Ming was so shy that her earlobes turned red. So, we have to go to this Isha town. We have to go to all the places on the list. We have to figure it out. It's the first thing I do for you. Xiaohua, you are so nice. Ming said affectionately. Hehe, you know I'm nice. Why don't you kiss me? Zhang Xiaohua said shamelessly. Ming rolled her eyes at him and then looked around. There didn't seem to be anyone on the mountain road. She moved her mouth closer. Just as she touched Zhang Xiaohua's face, the sound of horse hooves suddenly came. Ming was shocked and immediately moved away. Her face was so red that it looked like it was dripping blood. With a leap, he jumped back onto the white horse. There are so many annoying people in this world. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and looked at Ming's cherry lips reluctantly. He had long cursed the person who had come without seeing his shadow 10,000 times in his heart. The people behind the mountain road were still far away. It took them half a cup of tea's time to catch up with them. Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to look back. She just circled David's deer to the side and made way for the pipe. However, annoying people always had annoying things. You couldn't avoid them even if you wanted to. The newcomers were a group of 7 or 8 young men in their early 20s. They were all dressed up in bright and colorful clothes. There were even a few of them who had something similar to a pearl hairpin on their temples. It really made people puzzled as to whether they were men or women. They rode on their horses and stirred up a lot of dust. Meng frowned slightly. When they passed by, one of the men occasionally looked back. He saw Meng and David's deer on the side of the road. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua's face, he couldn't help laughing. He shouted, "Senior brothers, look! They are 2 young men who just came out of Jianghu." "Oh, really?" Everyone shouted and reined in their horses. They shouted, "We haven't had fun for a long time. Good food delivered to our door." As they spoke, they surrounded the horses and spread out in all directions to block Zhang Xiaohua and Dream's path. Zhang Xiaohua was already impatient in her heart. She hated these people for ruining her fun. When she saw this, her face was full of panic. However, she sneered in her heart. "Hey, boy, which sect are you from?" The disciple who saw Zhang Xiaohua shouted, "Please vote for me. Please vote for me. Please keep it. Please tip me. Thank you." -4. Chapter 993. This little one is from Beidou School. I don't know what senior brothers. Do you have any advice for me? Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be so scared that she was tongue-tied. Beidou School? The disciple was obviously surprised. He turned around and asked, "Senior brothers, have you ever heard of this Beidou School?" No. Maybe it's a small mountain sect. How could we have heard of it?" The disciples burst into laughter. "Senior brothers." Zhang Xiaohua cupped her hands and smiled. "I don't know which sect you are from. When we went out, the elders of our sect told us to get in touch with the senior brothers and sisters in Jianghu." "Hee, of course our sect is famous in Jianghu. Why don't you guess?" The disciple laughed. "Huh." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Are you a senior brother from the Righteous Alliance?" The disciple slightly frowned and shook his head. "No." Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and asked curiously, "Are you a senior brother from the Tenryu sect?" "You little brat, we are colluding with you, but you are joking with us. Why don't you say that we are disciples of the fragrant religion and Dalan temple?" Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. "Senior brother, didn't you say that you are from a famous sect? I don't know much about the sects in Jianghu, so I can only say this much." "Humph." The disciple sneered. "You are just making fun of us. We are the ones making fun of you, so why are you still quibbling?" "I am innocent." Zhang Xiaohua also shouted, "Senior brother, please explain." "You little brat, listen carefully. We are disciples of Luoying Island." "Luoying Island?" This time it was Zhang Xiaohua's turn to sneer. He had never heard of this name before. Even Ye Qinyu had never mentioned it before. From this, one could see the reputation of Luoying Island. "You brat, I'll let you know that my Luoying Island is second only to the 4 great sects. If you make friends with us, you can also report to the head of the Beidou School when you return to the sect." Zhang Xiaohua was really speechless. He had seen the super big sects of Jianghu, the Tenryu sect, and the Dalan temple. He was also a disciple of the fragrant religion. He had even seen the Misty School and the Rejuvenation Valley. He also had the identity of a mortal Panin. So how could he put this Luoying Island in his eyes? "I'll listen to senior apprentice brother's instructions. How can we befriend Luoying Island?" "Ha, at least you're sensible." A disciple clamored and said, "When I first came out of Jianghu, needless to say, I was played with many times. Hee, you brat, you're lucky to have met us. We'll teach you a little lesson and let you know what is called Jianghu." Then, he glanced at the Dalan temple from the corner of his eyes. He had already taken off his veil and was barefaced like before. At this time, he saw a stranger staring at him and couldn't help but frown. Zhang Xiaohua was even angrier. He reached out his hand to grab the great wisdom sword. Who would have thought that the disciple would say something that made him not know whether to laugh or cry? "I see that your senior apprentice sister also has a peach blossom face. I think she has an affair with you. I don't need to guess. Your sect sent the two of you out to gain experience together. It must be because they want to help you. Only in times of crisis can you see true feelings. Moreover, in Jianghu, it is very normal for people to be intimate with each other. How about this? You kiss your senior apprentice sister in front of us and let us have some fun. Then, we'll consider you have passed the first test. Ah. Zhang Xiaohua laughed in his heart. He pulled back his hand from Great Wisdom Sword and said to the dream with a crying face, Senior apprentice sister, look, I told you that Jianghu is dangerous and you still insisted on following us. What should I do? Be obedient and let me kiss you. Anyway, I've already kissed you many times. This time won't make a difference. In the dream, Zhang Xiaohua was teasing her. She couldn't help but get angry and scolded. Go to hell. If you still want to listen to me talk to you in the future, immediately send these people away. I can still consider it. Otherwise, don't even think about it for the rest of your life. Seeing that the dream was angry, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to pretend anymore. He immediately stood up and laughed. Don't be angry. Don't be angry. It was a lonely journey. It was just a joke, right? I will send them away now. Send them away. After he finished speaking, he raised Great Wisdom Sword and shouted, Where did these brats come from? This Xiaoxia has never heard of Luoing Island. I'm too lazy to play with you. Didn't you hear what my senior apprentice sister said? Quickly get lost. This Xiaoxia saw that although you spoke rudely, you didn't have any bad intentions. You didn't take advantage of the fact that there aren't many people here to do anything bad. This Xiaoxia will let you go. Ah? When the group of people heard this, they all laughed. It was as if they were watching a silent farce. AI, these people, Zhang Xiaohua sighed. If I didn't show them some real skills, they would really think that I'm from a small mountain sect. When everyone was laughing, Zhang Xiaohua took out her short sword and prepared to give them a good show. At this time, there was a spectacular sound of horse hooves. It was like the sound of a mountain overturning the sea. It was very fast coming from afar. In just a moment, a group of black horses was approaching. The horses were full of valiant men. They were holding long swords in their hands. In front of them were a man and two women. At this time, the disciples of Luoing Island didn't have time to tease Zhang Xiaohua. They hurriedly led their horses to the side of the road and waited for the group of people to pass by. Who would have thought that they would have the same experience as Zhang Xiaohua? When the three people in front saw the people on the side of the road, their eyes revealed an indescribable meaning. They looked at each other and raised their hands. The whole group of horses immediately stopped. Dozens of black horses stopped uniformly. The scene was quite spectacular. The woman in front of them patted her black horse. She cupped her hands towards the disciples of Luoing Island and said, We are the disciples of Dragon God Sect's patrol team. Which sect do you belong to? Tenryu sect? The disciples of Luoing Island were surprised and asked strangely, This senior sister, I heard that the Tenryu sect has never been in Jianghu. How come there is a patrol team? The woman scolded, My Dragon God Sect's actions. Who are you to criticize? Quickly report your name. Otherwise, you will be killed. This one is a disciple of Luoing Island. The disciple didn't dare to delay and immediately said while trembling, Luoing Island? The woman frowned and said, I have never heard of it. Then, she patted her horse and went in front of Zhang Xiaohua. She looked at her and asked, This little brother, which sect do you belong to? Little brother? Zhang Xiaohua was a bit confused. Was there a fragrant religion written on her face? However, Zhang Xiaohua was also very polite. She cupped her hands and said, This one is a disciple of Beta School. I guess this senior sister of Tenryu sect has never heard of it. Beta School? The woman sucked in a breath of cold air and said with some surprise, Are you really from Beta School? Ah? Zhang Xiaohua was even more surprised and said, Yes, Beta School. You know about it? The woman said seriously, That's right. Previously, an immortal appeared in Rejuvenation Valley and wanted to take Rejuvenation Valley's Nie Qinyu as a disciple of the immortal. But Nie Qinyu claimed that she was a disciple of Beidou School and didn't want to go to another school. Tell me, who in Jianghu doesn't know about Beidou School? Haha. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head. He knew about this, but he didn't expect Nie Qinyu to refuse like this. In his opinion, there was no difference between being a disciple of Beidou school and being a disciple of an immortal. But, in the eyes of Jianghu people, Beidou school seemed to be slowly becoming famous. It seems that if I don't want to attract attention in the future, I have to change my name, Zhang Xiaohua thought. Then, he looked at the dream and said, This one doesn't know what senior sister said. My Beidou school is indeed a small mountain sect. I also don't know where this rejuvenation valley is. The woman looked at the dream and asked, This is your senior sister? Yes, she is my senior sister. May I ask, this girl's name? The woman turned her head and asked the dream. What's there to ask about a small mountain sect's disciple? The dream was obviously in a bad mood and didn't want to pay attention to her. The Tenryu sect's female disciple didn't take it seriously. She said with a smile, Miss, you have a big temper, but I don't know why. Then, she turned her eyes to the Luoying Island's disciples and asked curiously, Could it be that these guys from Luoying Island have done something despicable? Bah. The dream gently spat and said, We are just fledglings who have just left the sect. The Luoying Island's senior brothers want to teach us the rules of Jianghu. Naturally, we have to listen. As for what they do, they dare. The Tenryu sect's female disciple laughed and didn't ask any more questions. She turned back and whispered a few words to the other two disciples. Then, she looked at the people on the side of the road. She raised her hand and made a strange gesture. Then, she rode her black horse and led the way. Behind them, a group of big men also urged their horses. However, when the group of horses passed by, a dozen men suddenly came out of the group and surrounded the 6 Luoying Island's disciples. Zhang Xiaohua and Mingli were a few steps away from them. The Tenryu sect's disciples separated them from the Luoying Island's disciples. Before Zhang Xiaohua realized what was going on, there were screams coming from the circle. Io, why did they suddenly kill us? When Zhang Xiaohua and Mingli urged their horses to come over, the screams stopped. The Tenryu sect's disciples turned their horses around. They were expressionless. They didn't even look at Zhang Xiaohua and Mingli. They patted their horses and went straight away. On the side of the road, the 6 people who were still alive a moment ago were now paralyzed on the ground. There weren't many bloodstains on their bodies, only some blood seeping out of their throats and chests. It was obvious that they were no longer alive. Beside them, there was a green triangular flag, and on the flag, there was a lifelike little dragon. AI, the Tenryu sect's way of doing things is really overbearing, Zhang Xiaohua sighed in her heart. They didn't ask for the reason. Just based on their own likes and dislikes, they took away 6 lives indiscriminately. -4. Chapter 994. After hearing Zhang Xiaohua's words, Meng also felt a little uneasy. She whispered, Xiaohua, I'm just angry at them. They don't have good intentions. Zhang Xiaohua patted her head and said, It's none of your business. I guess that senior sister from the Tenryu sect also encountered something like this when she was young. In fact, I was going to get angry just now. It was inevitable that I would have a conflict with them. Moreover, they are acting so gentle and refined now. Who knows, they might change their attitude in a moment. Alas, there's no such thing as good and evil in Jianghu. Perhaps only the Tenryu sect's clean methods can prevent people from bullying them. Maybe, but I think the Tenryu sect is not as bad as the rumors say. At least, they didn't do anything to us. You're right, but there are 6 living people after all. Forget it. Why are we talking about them? Let's hurry up. The Tenryu sect's sudden appearance in Jianghu is also an important matter. We still need to report to the sect leader. Xiaohua, I suddenly understand. Didn't the people from Luoying Island ask the people from the Tenryu sect? Why didn't anyone know that they were patrolling? Why? That must be it. As long as they report their names, there will be no survivors. Of course, no one will know. Nonsense. Aren't we living well? Zhang Xiaohua disagreed. Let's go. We should hurry to Yixia town. Meng didn't argue with him, and the two of them rode along the main road. Although the two of them were fast, When the sky darkened and they arrived at a rather large town, they still didn't see any heavenly dragon sect troops. When they arrived at the town, Zhang Xiaohua led David's deer and was about to go forward to inquire. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. She glanced at the crowd in front of her. However, the crowd looked hurried. They were either going home, looking for a place to stay, or shopping. There was no one suspicious. What's wrong? What's the matter? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua suddenly stop, Meng quickly walked over and asked, "It's nothing. I just feel like someone is staring at us." Zhang Xiaohua looked ahead unwillingly. "Where are they?" Meng Yi looked over and probed. "Are they from the daytime Tenryu sect?" "No." Zhang Xiaohua was very certain. Although the people of the Tenryu sect are highly skilled in martial arts, but I should be able to find them. Besides, they wouldn't do something so boring. You have to remember that we are just ordinary students of Beidou School. Meng Yi looked at it for a long time, but didn't see anything. He asked, "Are you sure?" "I didn't see anything." Hee, maybe I am overthinking it. Zhang Xiaohua was also not confident. After that, Zhang Xiaohua walked to a street vendor and asked softly, "Sir, may I ask, is this Yixia town?" The old man who was selling vegetables looked up at him and nodded. "This is Yixia town. Are you looking for an inn to stay in?" As he spoke, he pointed with his finger and said, "About 1,000 feet ahead, there's an excellent inn." Zhang Xiaohua turned around and said, "Thank you, sir, but I still have something to ask." "Oh, please tell me." The old man probably hadn't seen such a polite person in Jianghu. He said happily, "I have lived in Yixia town for more than 60 years. There is nothing in this town that I don't know." "Haha, that's great." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and asked, "Do you know a person called Hou Mingqing?" Hou Mingqing? The old man was stunned. He frowned and thought for a long time. "How old is he? Where is he in town? What?" Zhang Xiaohua curled his lips. "If I knew where he was in town, would I still need to ask you?" But he said, "I don't know how old he is, but he must be over 40 or 50 years old." The old man thought for a long time and finally shook his head. "Little brother, I'm old and my brain isn't very bright. I can't remember this person's name. You'd better go to the inn and ask the waiter. They've heard a lot and seen a lot. Maybe they'll know." Zhang Xiaohua thought it was reasonable. When he was about to leave, he asked again then, "Sir, is there a big family with the surname Ho in Yixia town?" "Oh, of course I know. One is in the west of town. The current head of the family is called Ho Feng. His family has thousands of acres of fertile land in the North Mountain. The other family is in the north of town. The head of the family died young. Now he is a widow with 4 children and runs a jade business. But there is no one named Hou Mingqing in either of them. I am sure of that." Zhang Xiaohua gave a thumbs up to Meng and said goodbye to the old man. She went straight to the inn that the old man mentioned. The waiter of the inn was really clever, but he still didn't know that there was a man named Hou Mingqing in Yixia town. Zhang Xiaohua and Meng were not surprised. The great master Changgung said that Hou Mingqing was from 40 years ago. It was doubtful that Hou Mingqing was still alive, let alone remembered after so many years. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua asked about the specific location of the 2 families with the surname Hou in town. Zhang Xiaohua and Meng were resting separately. It was late now, so it was not a good time to visit. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua and Meng finished washing up and were about to leave the inn with their horses. At this time, there was a noise from the shop in front of the inn. "Do you know? Just last night, something big happened in town." "Something big? What big thing could it be?" "I heard the faint sound of a gong outside and there was a lot of noise. It is late at night, and I am too lazy to get up." "Alas, you said that the weather is unpredictable, and people are unpredictable. The whole family has accumulated a lot of good karma for their whole life. How did they end up like this?" "The whole family?" Someone asked curiously, "Brother, do you mean the Ho family in the west or the north?" "Nonsense. Of course it's Ho Laofeng from Zhenxi. He's always been kind to the people around him. Although he's not a Buddha in every household, he sends cotton in winter and wrinkles in summer. Why did this natural disaster fall on his family? Tell me, although the widow and her son from Zhenbei are usually extremely harsh, the heavens may have burned them on account of them seizing the family property. But how could they burn Ho Laofeng as well? It is strange. One is in the west, and the other is in the north. They are so far away from each other. Both of them are from the Ho family. What? Don't tell me. You want the entire town to burn? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's face changed. She pulled Ming's hand and said, "Quick, let's go." Ming heard it too. She gritted her teeth and said, "Let's go. There must be something fishy about this." When the two of them arrived at Ho Feng's house, they couldn't help but feel disheartened. This was a rather large house, but at this time, it had been reduced to broken bricks and tiles. The charred wooden beams still had some faint flames, and there was a faint white steam rising from the top of the house. It should be the water vapor from the people in town putting out the fire last night. There were quite a number of people gathered in front of the charred house. Zhang Xiaohua found a young man with disheveled clothes and water stains on his body and asked, "Brother, I'm just passing by. There seems to be a fire here. Looking at your appearance, you should have participated in the extinguishing of the fire last night, right?" The young man looked at Zhang Xiaohua and nodded. "That's right. In the early hours of this morning, the house suddenly caught fire. I happened to live nearby, so I was the first to know." The young man recounted what he had seen last night and sighed. It's a pity that old Master Ho was such a good man, yet he was burned alive in there. Alas, there isn't a single person left alive in the entire Ho mansion. Not even one? Meng gritted her teeth and asked. "That's right. The officials were here just now. I heard from them that they just came from the Ho family in Jinbei. It's not the same as here. All the corpses were found in the rooms. None of them escaped." Many thanks. After hearing the young man's words, Zhang Xiaohua retracted his divine sense. That person was right. There was not a single living being in the Marquis's mansion. "Do you still want to go to the north to take a look?" Zhang Xiaohua turned to ask Ming. Ming shook her head blankly and said, "No need. The fire was strange. If only one family encountered it, it would be fine. But two families with the surname Ho encountered it. If there is no connection, no one will believe it. If Ho Feng's family is like this, then there is no one alive in the other family. What's the use of going there? Could it be that the Dalan Temple did something?" Zhang Xiaohua frowned. "I don't think so. If the Dalan Temple wanted to hide it, they could have just not written the names of Yixia Town and Ho Mingqing. They could have even not given us the list. How could we force the great Master Changgung? Could it be the Tenryu sect?" Zhang Xiaohua immediately thought of what she saw on the official road. "That doesn't make sense." Meng shook her head. "Has the Tenryu sect ever been afraid of anyone in Jianghu? Even if there was something that could be used against them, would they care about it being exposed? Even if you and I know, what's the use? Besides, we are only looking for Ho Mingqing to ask about my background. What does it have to do with the Tenryu sect?" "That's right. The Tenryu sect can't know our purpose." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. But then she frowned. "Could it be that someone is following us? Yesterday, when I was asking people in the town, someone overheard us?" Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua felt his hair stand on end. That day, he had released his divine sense, and there was no one around. If it was as he expected, and he felt that there was someone following him, then that person's martial arts, no, the divine ability of the immortal Tao, was just how high was that person's martial arts, no, divine ability of the immortal Tao? Involuntarily, Zhang Xiaohua looked around for a long time. Then, she released her divine sense to check carefully. Unfortunately, the morning in Yixia Town was the same as in other places. Only the early birds were looking for insects. Meng was stunned when she saw Zhang Xiaohua's nervous expression. She looked around vigilantly. -4. Chapter 995. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua whispered, "Let's go, Ming. There are no more clues here. Let's go to the next place." "Okay." Ming nodded. The two of them mounted the horse and went straight to the town. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the villagers and thought for a while. In the end, he did not dismount the horse and ask. After they were far away from the town, Ming could not help but ask, "Where is the next place? If you don't ask, how are we going to get there?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Let's leave the town first. I keep having the feeling that someone is following us. Now that we've asked, even if we give a few different names, they'll know where we're going once we leave. Wouldn't that be telling them for nothing?" "Okay, I'll listen to you. Meng was a little sad. Zhang Xiaohua knew what she was thinking. He patted David's deer and went forward to hold her hand. He said, Meng, don't think too much. No matter what your background is, no matter who your family is, you're always a dream in my heart. The girl who made my heart flutter. I'll miss you, protect you, cherish you. I'll accompany you day and night, never to be separated. Xiaohua. Meng called out to Zhang Xiaohua and jumped into his arms. She hugged Zhang Xiaohua's waist and buried her head in Zhang Xiaohua's chest. After a while, Meng raised her head and her cherry lips were right in front of him. Zhang Xiaohua could not help but lower his head and kiss her. After a long time, the two of them who had been practicing internal energy for a long time separated. Meng leaned her body against Zhang Xiaohua and her chest heaved up and down. She was still very excited. The deer, Huan Huan, stood quietly by the side of the road. The big white horse also looked for grass around Huan Huan and slowly chewed on it. The entire road was very quiet. Xiaohua, maybe? I don't have to look for my background. Isn't it better to be with you and live happily on Lingxiang Peak? This was the second time Meng made this request. It is good to live on Lingxiang Peak. But, do you think you can let go of everything in the past? You don't want to think about your background anymore? Zhang Xiaohua asked, if your parents want to know about you, and you? Hide on Lingxiang Peak? Won't you be unfilial? Zhang Xiaohua's words were naturally emotional. His parents were in the Guozhuang house, but he and his second brother could not rush back to tell them that they were safe. He tried to persuade Ming to find her home. Okay. I'll listen to you. Ming looked at her lover, her heart full of sweetness. Where are we going? Meng nestled in Zhang Xiaohua's arms and asked. Let me see. As she spoke, Zhang Xiaohua reached into her bosom and took out the list. She first looked left and right, then released her divine sense and carefully checked it. Only then did she open it, take a look, and immediately put it back into her bosom. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua so careful, Meng said, Xiaohua, you don't have to say anything. I will go with you. If you say it and others hear it, won't it spoil our plans? As she spoke, Meng's eyes looked left and right, as if there was someone nearby. And Zhang Xiaohua could not help but look around. She nodded and said, I already know the place and the name of the person. Let's go ahead and find a place to ask. After he finished speaking, Zhang Xiaohua burst out laughing and said, even if I don't tell you, when I ask someone, don't you want someone else to hear it? Hee. Meng laughed and said, when you ask someone, you just have to be careful. If there are too many people, they may not be able to hear it. Zhang Xiaohua thought it made sense. They rode forward for half a day and came to a very small town. In order to cover up, Zhang Xiaohua let Ming cover for him. They sat in a tea house and found an excuse to leave for a while. Then they found a secluded place and used the earth escape. They also found a place where there was no one and asked a few older people about the place. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua was also careful and asked a few more irrelevant places. However, he was not familiar with this place, so most of the things he asked were unknown. He wanted to ask about the last few places, but he was afraid that others would know and catch him in one fell swoop. When Zhang Xiaohua appeared in the tea house again, there was a faint smile on his face. Meng knew that he had a plan in mind, so she was also happy. She accompanied Zhang Xiaohua to have some tea and snacks, and then they continued on their way. Next, they went to Baiquan Mountain, which was an ancient martial arts family. Although they came out of Yixia town and went in a random direction, they gathered together. Even if the direction was wrong, the difference was not big. Although it was a small matter, it also made Meng feel refreshed. She felt that God had opened his eyes and allowed them to find some clues smoothly. Zhang Xiaohua was happy to see Meng Yao, and Zhang Xiaohua was naturally happy to accompany her. The two of them chattered about something, but looking at their happy appearance, it was similar to going on a scenic tour. After a day and a night, they came to the front of a mountain at dusk. Is it here? Meng looked at the tall mountain and asked. Well, it should be. This is Baiquan Mountain. The second person on the list is a person named Cheng Miao. I have asked the people in the town yesterday. It seems that there is a Cheng family in Baiquan Mountain, which is a martial arts family. It has been entrenched for many years. The mountain is so big. How can we find it? It's very easy to find. The Cheng family is not on the mountain, but in a place called Cheng Village at the foot of the mountain. It is at the mountain pass of Baiquan Mountain, built by the mountain. Is it there? Meng pointed with her finger. It should be. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the smoke rising from the foot of the mountain in the distance and said with a smile, "Let's not rest this time. Even if it is dark, we have to go to Cheng Village first." Yes, Meng said with a smile. The two of them walked for half a meal and were much closer to Cheng Village. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the smoke in the distance and shouted, "Oh no, this is not smoke. I am afraid." As she said that, she patted David's deer and immediately rushed to Cheng Village as fast as lightning. However, when they arrived, the scene in front of them stunned them. The whole Cheng Village had been turned into ashes. The smoke they saw just now was only the black smoke of the village when it was set on fire. This, Zhang Xiaohua stamped her foot and immediately released her divine sense. At this time, her divine sense could cover a large area, but in the whole area, there was no one who could attract her attention. What the hell is going on? Meng looked at the burned village and the dead bodies in front of the houses that had just been extinguished. She could not help but feel sad and said to herself, I just want to know my background. Is this too much? This is the second time. Zhang Xiaohua said to herself, if the incident in Yixia town was accidental, then the incident in Baiquan Mountain was inevitable. This must be related to Meng's background. But what is it about Meng's background that can't be known by others? Moreover, even Meng herself does not know the contents of the list. How could others know? Dalan Temple? Zhang Xiaohua's mind immediately flashed. Only the great master Changgung or the elders of the Dalan Temple know about the things on the list. Could it be that the Dalan Temple pretended to be sanctimonious and gave us the list on the surface, but secretly erased all traces of it? It must be. Otherwise, why would the great master Changgung be so shocked when he saw Meng's face? 40 years ago, the woman who looked like Meng was Meng's mother. Who could make the great master Changgung so shocked? Why did the Dalan Temple try so hard to stop Meng from meeting her mother? But if the great master Changgung killed Meng, wouldn't it be over? Well, of course not. First, it would offend the fragrant temple. Second, it would create a blood feud with Meng's mother. I guess the Dalan Temple does not want to see that happen. But how can they hide it from us for a while? How can they hide it forever? Meng will meet her mother sooner or later. The more Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, the more confused she became. At this time, Meng had already looked around the small mountain village. The village was not big, but there were about 100 families. There was not a single living person. Meng's expression was very solemn. When she came to Zhang Xiaohua's side, she was already determined. There are no living people, right? Zhang Xiaohua asked knowingly. Well, even the livestock were burned to death. Meng said with grief and indignation, Xiaohua, I've decided not to look for my background. Even if I can't see my mother in this life, even if I can't be happy in this life, I won't look for it. Ah, have you decided? Zhang Xiaohua understood Meng's feelings very well. Yes, I've decided. Well, I support you. But Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, if there are no accidents, the others on the list, even if we don't look for them, they may not be alive. Maybe their fates were already decided when the Dalan Temple wrote this list. Meng shook her head. Maybe, but if I go, they will certainly die. If I don't go, maybe they will have a chance to live. Xiaohua, let me deceive myself. I'd rather believe that if I don't go, they can live well, even if they are now ashes. Okay. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and took out the list. She rolled it into a ball and rubbed it between her palms. It turned into scraps of paper, and the handwriting could no longer be seen. With a wave of her hand, the scraps of paper flew between heaven and earth, and not a trace of it could be seen. Seeing the list destroyed, Meng seemed to have removed a big stone from her heart. She took a deep breath and forced a smile. Well, it's all over now. Let's go back to the incense cult and start our happy life at Lingxiang Peak. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua laughed. You don't have to worry about this pugilistic world anymore. Of course, I'll go back with you. Then, the two of them looked back at the Cheng village, which was still smoking, and left. -4. Chapter 996. A few days later, Zhang Xiaohua and Dream arrived at a lush mountain range. Dream smiled and said, "I thought that the mountains in our sect were beautiful, but now, it seems that I'm just a frog at the bottom of a well. There are so many beautiful mountains and rivers here, but the scenery is different from each other. Each has its own unique characteristics, each has its own unique charm. None of them are worse than the sect's." That's right, even the place where the Dalan Temple is, the whole mountain range may not be smaller than Zhuanxiang Cult. That huge Guiyuan Tower seems to be no worse than Huansu. Fortunately, Zhuanxiang Cult is now open. There will be plenty of opportunities to come out in the future. Maybe after the martial arts convention, we can ask the leader for a job and walk around the surrounding mountains. Zhang Xiaohua clapped her hands. That's right, that's what it means to laugh proudly in Jianghu. Unlike now, we have to go back after just a few days. I don't know the name of this mountain. We're just walking around blindly. It'll be troublesome if we want to come back in the future. Isn't that easy? Just find someone to ask. Just as they were talking, Zhang Xiaohua was suddenly stunned. He looked into the distance thoughtfully. When Dream saw this, she also turned her head. Before she could see clearly, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard from that direction. Zhang Xiaohua was even more puzzled and blurted out, "Why is he here?" "Who?" Dream looked at the figure in the distance and said, "You can see him?" "Yes, it's someone I know, so it's easy to recognize him." "You know him in Jianghu?" Dream asked curiously. "Yes, let's go and see." "The person I know seems to be unable to hold on." As they spoke, the two of them spurred their horses and rushed forward along the mountain path. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the two of them reached the peak of the mountain. At the peak, there were more than 10 people with weapons in their hands, surrounding the two carriages. In front of the carriages, there were two people, one big and one small. The small one was about 5 or 6 years old and held a toy sword in his hand. He was fighting with a skinny man in his 20s. The man's sword was casually parrying the attacks. It was obvious that he was just playing around. The big one at the side was bare-chested, revealing his bulging arms. He held a sword in his hand and was fighting with a tall and fat man. The man also held a sword in his hand, but it was thicker and wider than usual. When their swords clashed, sparks flew. On the mountain path, Zhang Xiaohua used his divine sense to observe the situation. He shook his head. Earlier at the foot of the mountain, she had seen that the man's sword skills were rusty. He only relied on his arms and some strength. His opponent seemed to be willing to let him win. He only exchanged blows with him and did not take the opportunity to kill him. Therefore, she followed Dream up the mountain path. Sure enough, the man used his strength to shake off the sword. He was somewhat impatient and said, "Chuzhigao, do you think it's fun? I've already let you have more than 100 moves. Don't you know that you're not my opponent? Why do you still want to make a pointless struggle?" The man who used the sword was the street performer that Zhang Xiaohua saved at Lu Town Square. The bone-solidifying pill formula was also obtained from this man called Chu Zhigao. Chu Zhigao said angrily, "Of course I know that I'm not your opponent, but you destroyed my home and burned down my house. Do I have to grovel and beg you for mercy? You really don't know what's good for you. My Jingli manor was only interested in your formula. I gave you face and asked you to hand it over. Why can't you listen to the manor lord's advice again and again? Don't tell me that it's really hard to hear." Bah! Chu Zhigao's spit almost sprayed on the man's face as he shouted, "How shameless! This Chu Zhigao's medicinal plaster is passed down from my ancestors. How can you exchange it for just 10 taels of silver from Jing Manor? Now you're bullying my sect. How can I give it to you?" "Ha ha, Chu Zhigao. Do you think your Horn Dragon Mountain is still the Horn Dragon Mountain from 10 years ago? You're already a street performer and selling medicinal paste. What are you talking about? The 10 taels of silver is the manor lord's kindness. If it's up to me, I'll just rob you." Bah! If it wasn't for the fact that Senior Chu left early and didn't leave behind his martial arts, we wouldn't be afraid of your Jingli manor. Lier, don't waste your breath on him. Just take him down. My patience has run out. Yes, Manor Lord. I'll do it now. As he spoke, the man who was fighting with the child at the side hurriedly brandished his sword. The child panicked and his sword was sent flying. Then, he was easily caught in the man's hand. Chu Zhigao, your son is already in my hands. Are you going to stop or not? When Chu Zhigao saw this, he let out a long sigh and threw his padao on the ground. Just as he was about to speak, a yellow figure suddenly flew out from another carriage and pounced on the face of the person who was holding the child. In the Tenryu sect, there was no one in the huge hall. Suddenly, there were sounds of hurried footsteps coming from outside the hall. When the footsteps reached the entrance of the hall, they stopped. After a while, there was still no movement. A strange black figure appeared above the hall. Then, as if he was flying, he flew to the tall chair in the hall. A voice came from the bamboo hat. What's the emergency? How dare you disturb my cultivation? Zing zong. There were a few light footsteps. A woman came forward and bowed. Lord Sakura, this little one has found the whereabouts of the saintess. What? Sakura lost his composure. He immediately stood up from his chair and shouted, Where is ya? Reporting to Sect Master, the saintess is now in the Dalan Temple. What? The bald donkeys from the Dalan Temple? They actually dared to shackle the saintess of my dragon god sect? Men, Lord, please calm down. Please calm down. The woman hurriedly said, The saintess isn't imprisoned by the Dalan Temple. She is an envoy of the fragrant religion. She is here to deliver an invitation to the Dalan Temple. Invitation? Is it the same as the disciple from the fragrant religion who came to deliver the invitation? That's right. The holy maiden really went to the Dalan Temple as an emissary of the incense cult. She was accompanied by a young male disciple of the incense cult. According to the news from the Dalan Temple, this male disciple is called Ren Xiaoyao. He is the only disciple of the incense cult. Ren Xiaoyao? The only disciple of the fragrant religion? Sakura's expression relaxed. He sat on the chair and asked curiously, When did the fragrant religion have a disciple of the fragrant religion? Isn't this going against the Dalan Temple? What is the saintess situation? Reporting to Lord, the saintess seems to have lost her memory. She doesn't remember anything from the past. Even when our spies in the Dalan Temple tried to probe her using the secret code, the saintess didn't have any reaction. Of course, perhaps the saintess has other arrangements. This subordinate doesn't know. Spies? How did the Dalan Temple spies know the saintess' appearance? Sakura was somewhat angry. Lord, please calm down. The woman was very afraid. She whispered, Didn't Lord want this subordinate to hurry up? This subordinate has sent out some of the saintess portrait. Lord, rest assured, this subordinate knows that the portrait of the saintess will not be leaked. Moreover, they also don't know who the person in the portrait is. And Sakura asked again, Is the saintess returning to the fragrant religion? No, the woman revealed a strange expression and said, The saintess left the Dalan Temple and went in another direction. However, this disciple has already sent people over. But, for fear of affecting the saintess, this disciple didn't dare to approach. Good. Inform everyone that we are heading to the fragrant religion. Lord, you are going to participate in the martial arts convention? The woman was surprised. Didn't Lord Garuda set off a few days ago? But immediately, the woman came to her senses and bowed. Reporting to Lord, this subordinate will arrange it right away. In the fragrant religion, in a quiet room on the fragrant peak, Nun Jingyi was sitting on a chair. Nun Shuezhen was also sitting expressionlessly below. Lord, the disciples who went out to deliver the invitations have already returned. Although Peacock and Yuyan haven't returned, there is still news. Only Zixia and Ren Xiaoyao. Since they entered the Dalan Temple, there hasn't been any news. What do you think? No matter. Ren Xiaoyao went to the Dalan Temple for some other matters. I guess he was asked to stay by Changsheng and the others. Moreover, the Dalan Temple is far away from the fragrant religion. I'm afraid the news will be delayed. By the way, is there any other news about the immortal Dao people from Rejuvenation Valley? Replying to Sect Master, there isn't. Your respected self also knows that those of the immortal Dao come and go. If they didn't deliberately let others know, who would be able to see? We don't know how long this person of the way of immortality has been in Jianghu. Not only do we not know about it, I reckon that even the Tenryu sect may not know about it. That old man suddenly took a liking to Rejuvenation Valley. It's strange. Are all cultivators of the immortal Tao pure of heart and few desires, ignoring the mortal world? This subordinate does not dare to make wild guesses. Lord Hierarch is also a successor of the immortal Tao. This subordinate does not have that kind of feeling. Sigh, that's because my sect's cultivation is still too low. According to my disciple's message, that immortal could actually fly as high as a mountain. That's probably the legendary wind controlling technique. My sect can only float in the air right now. That's still far from it. If the light body technique is already so good, then there's no need to talk about the rest. However, this subordinate still has some thoughts. I don't know if it's appropriate to say it. Haha, you and I are senior sister. Although you didn't participate in the official selection and didn't take charge of a hall, but you have made great contributions to my sect. Others may not know, but how can this sect not know? If you have something to say, feel free to say it. Thank you, Lord Hierarch, for your wise judgment. This subordinate is happy even if I have to sacrifice my life. There's no need for that. It's all for the foundation of the incense sect, for the paradise of my Lingxiang peak. It's like this, Lord Hierarch. As the saying goes, there's no smoke without fire. That person of the immortal Tao doesn't usually appear in the world. Why did he appear after Zixia came to Don't Worry City? Although, there's no definite connection, but this subordinate still has some doubts. Please cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a collection, a tip, thank you. If you like this work, you're welcome to cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. -4. Chapter 997. Heh. So junior sister Shuezhen already knew? I thought you would keep your mouth shut. I didn't expect you to bring it up today. Please forgive me, Hierarch. When I first saw Zixia, I had some suspicions. But Hierarch is as wise as the sea. You must know my suspicions. Since you insist on keeping Zixia, you must have your own plans. Of course, I didn't dare to have any other ideas. Moreover, according to my observations over the past few years, there was nothing strange about Zixia. It seemed that she was really kept in the dark and didn't know anything. But senior sister Jingshuan's death didn't seem to have anything to do with her. Alas, not everyone can see the true face of the saintess of the Tenryu sect. Even in the incense cult, only I had the chance to see her. Junior sister Shuezhen must have met her by chance in Jianghu in her early years. Yes, that was more than 40 years ago. Therefore, senior sister Jingxian brought this Zixia back to the fragrant cult. Although she had good intentions, for a poor child who did not know her origins and had lost her memories, she did not know that she had already brought a hot potato back to lingering fragrance peak. Hierarch, do you also think that Zixia is the daughter of the saintess of the Tenryu sect? Nanjingyi smiled bitterly. She knocked on the chair with her hand and said, Zixia's face is almost exactly the same as the saintess of the Tenryu sect 40 years ago. I'm not blind. How can I not see it? If you say that Zixia has nothing to do with the saintess of the Tenryu sect, then no one will believe it. This is also the reason why I didn't give her a veil and didn't accept her into the Emotian Palace. I understand. Others think that Hierarch tolerates Zixia because of senior sister Jingxian. You even let her participate in the Orchid Evening refinement. Actually, our cult doesn't dare to offend the Tenryu sect too much. Besides, we also want the Tenryu sect spies to quickly recognize Zixia's face so that this matter can be reported back to the Tenryu sect. Then, we can send Zixia safely back to the Tenryu sect. However, junior sister Jing Xian met with a mishap. This sect was astonished. Such a mysterious method should have been done by the Tenryu sect. Since the daughter of the previous generation's saintess was by junior sister Jing Xian's side, how would they dare to do such a thing? So, sect master, you think this purple mist might not be? That's right. Our church had some doubts. So we sent Zixia to accompany Ren Xiaoyao to the Dalan temple. That's strange, sect leader. But why didn't you send him directly to the Tenryu sect? Wouldn't we know after a test? Nun Shuizhen was very puzzled. Junior sister Shuizhen, although our cult can't confirm that Zixia is the descendant of the Tenryu sect saintess, according to old legends, the previous saintesses of the Tenryu sect were all the daughters of the Tenryu sect's sect master Di Shirtian. We can't risk sending Di Shirtian's daughter to Di Shirtian. Isn't this a clear slap to the Tenryu sect's face? Ordering sect master Di Shirtian's daughter around? Oh, I understand. Nun Shuizhen was enlightened. Sending Zixia to the Dalan temple can first test the Tenryu sect's reaction, and second tell the Tenryu sect that we didn't know this was the descendant of your saintess. Sect master is brilliant. Haha, junior sister, you only know one thing but don't know the other. There's a second reason why we sent Zixia. Sect leader, please enlighten us. That's Ren Xiaoyao. Ren Xiaoyao? That silly brat? Nun Shuizhen was even more baffled. Isn't he just a lucky brat? Ah, he's not just lucky. Nun Jingyi smiled wryly. He's the only person our sect can't figure out. Didn't he call himself some Beidou school? A small mountain sect? A sect like that is as common as a carp crossing a river in the Jianghu. Who would remember it? Sect leader, you can just send someone to investigate. The key is that he's a Beidou school. Our sect has already sent people to investigate, but it hasn't been long enough, so we haven't made any progress. However, do you remember what Rejuvenation Valley's Nie Qinyu said in front of those from the Immortal Tao? Of course I do. She's just an infatuated child who doesn't understand the ways of the world. She's still thinking about Ren Xiaoyao in her heart. It can't be counted as real. But junior sister, haven't you thought about it? Does the formation Rejuvenation Valley used to face the enemy have anything to do with Ren Xiaoyao? That's impossible. Nun Shuizhen immediately shook her head. Rejuvenation Valley has been established for over 1,000 years. It's not strange for them to occasionally obtain some formations from the Immortal Tao that can resist martial arts. What does this have to do with Ren Xiaoyao? But don't forget, Nie Qinyu told the seniors from the Immortal Tao that she'd already obtained some of the Beidou school's incantations for internal strength. Nun Shuizhen really hadn't paid attention to this sentence. Our sect has already sent people to investigate. Nie Qinyu's constitution is weak, and she can't practice martial arts. Therefore, the martial arts passed down in Rejuvenation Valley are only practiced by her eldest sister, Nie Qianrong, and second sister, Nie Qianxiu. She doesn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. But look, she's already obtained some Beidou school's incantations. Needless to say, they were passed down by Ren Xiaoyao. This incantation. What kind of incantation is it? Can it allow a woman who can't practice martial arts to practice it? Why don't we have the disciples of Carefree City ask Nie Qinyu? It was possible in the past, but now, it's no longer possible. Nun Jingyi shook her head. The jade talisman given by the Immortal Tao Senior is too dangerous. Even the Tenryu sect, SKTSK, they wouldn't dare to use force. Then, she said thoughtfully, the strangest thing is that Ren Xiaoyao has the incantation for this internal strength incantation, but his own internal strength isn't good enough. His lightness skill is a complete mess. When he barged into Lingering Fragrance Peak, he relied entirely on the strength of his arms. That sword embryo is also half-baked. Not exactly half-baked. It should be some kind of strange sword technique. Don't you think this is strange? So, Lord Sect Leader sent Ren Xiaoyao to Huansu? Nun Shuizhen was enlightened. That's right. Our sect wanted to see Ren Xiaoyao's true ability. It's just that this guy is a troublemaker. Just as he entered Huansu, a huge change happened there. Could it be that Lord Sect Leader suspects that the huge change has something to do with Ren Xiaoyao? It'll be great if it has something to do with him. Nun Jingyi smiled bitterly. To be able to mess up Huansu's array, what kind of immortal Tao cultivation does he have? Even our sect won't have this kind of ability even if we cultivate for another 60 years. Ren Xiaoyao, how could he have it? And the most reassuring thing is, Nun Jingyi looked out the window and sighed. Ren Xiaoyao, he actually gave me the Chao Huan pill that Emo Qingshan found. Emo Qingshan? Chao Huan pill? Nun Shuizhen cried out in shock. Emo Qingshan, is he still alive? Chao Huan pill? Isn't Isn't that the legendary immortal Tao spiritual herb? Once consumed, it'll immediately. Imo Qingshan died long ago. I don't know when he died. Sigh. It's been hard on him then. She sighed again. Junior sister Xuezhen is right. I didn't expect that the Chao Huan pill in the immortal Tao's legends would really exist in Huan Su. Think about it. If that Ren Xiaoyao was a person of the immortal Tao, how could he return the Chao Huan pill to our sect? He only needed to consume the Chao Huan pill himself and destroy the thing that Imo Qingshan left for our sect. Who in this world would know that it was Ren Xiaoyao who took the Chao Huan pill? Yes, Sir Cult Leader is right. It can only mean that Ren Xiaoyao doesn't seem to understand. He's indeed a person of the martial Tao, and he's also from a small mountain sect. No wonder Sir Cult Leader was so protective of him in the past. It turns out that there's such a reason behind it. Yes, this is also the reason why our sect couldn't see through Ren Xiaoyao. However, this isn't the reason why our sect trusts Ren Xiaoyao. This time we sent Ren Xiaoyao to be with Zixia. It's also because we want to see what kind of person he is. Who cares what kind of person he is? He's not a person of the immortal Tao. Didn't you hear that the immortal Tao senior hasn't heard of Beidou school? Since he's a person of the martial Tao, there's no way he can escape from our fragrant cult. But, junior sister Xuezhen, you seem to have forgotten something. What is it? Abbess Xuezhen asked curiously. Nye Qianyu? Abbess Jingyi smiled. Junior sister, have you forgotten? Nye Qianyu is the only disciple of our protector. Not only did she bear the reputation of being unmarried, but she also claimed to be a disciple of Beidou school. For her to have the determination to reject the immortal Tao means that her love for Ren Xiaoyao is stronger than gold. What else can it mean? If our sect wants to kill Ren Xiaoyao, this little girl will crush the jade slip in anger. Although the immortal Tao senior may not reach out to meddle in this matter, but if this girl also enters the immortal Tao, I'm afraid it'll be detrimental to our fragrant cult in the future. With a hiss, Abbess Xuezhen sucked in a breath of cold air and smiled bitterly. I really didn't think that much. I really didn't think there were so many implications. Pulling one hair will affect the whole body. I really can't act rashly. But this little girl doesn't seem to know about the matter between Zixia and Ren Xiaoyao. If she knew, would she still act like this? Abbess Xuezhen probed. Alas, who knows? The most difficult thing to understand in this world is love. No one knows what Nye Qianyu is thinking. Maybe it's because of love that she hates, or maybe it's because of love that she loves even more. But this isn't something we need to consider. Anyway, Ren Xiaoyao is our protector. If we can use him, then use him. If we can't use him, then don't use him. Leader, you're brilliant. Abbess Xuezhen bowed and said, I didn't expect Leader to be so clear about these details. I thought Leader had only heard of Nye Qianyu's name. Junior sister Xuezhen, you must remember that the details determine success or failure. Any small link can affect the big picture in the end. Heh. Well, we've said so many useless and depressing things. Now, let's talk about something that makes people happy. Abbess Jingyi stretched, which was rare for her, and said with a smile, Have you done the things I asked you to do? Please cast a monthly vote, a recommendation vote, a collection, and a tip. Thank you. If you like this work, you're welcome to cast a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. -4. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.